All right, strap in. Here we go.
But I think the development of full artificial intelligence will spell the end of the human race.
It's a flying object and we don't know what it is. I would hope somebody is checking it out.
I don't know if it was a rocket or whatever, but it could be fast, opposite direction. It was too fast to be an airplane.
I'm glad the Pentagon is looking at this, because if it poses a threat, I want them on top of it.
Well, the craft generates its own gravitational field.
You said there's lights in the sky?
The internet has become the command center for criminals and terrorists.
911, what's your emergency? I need help, please help!
Aliens won't let it happen. You know, that's what we're instructed to say.
Roswell, Area 51. Alien kept deep under the ground.
1, 0,
Doesn't have your best interest in mind. The government is self-serving. You're here for a reason. You're listening to Troubled Minds Radio. Broadcasting live from a secret bunker just off the extraterrestrial highway. Somewhere in the desert sands outside of Las Vegas. From somewhere in space-time, loosely labeled Generation X on planet Earth. And asking questions of you in earnest into the digital darkness. Well, good evening, and welcome to Troubled Minds Radio. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, D-Live, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting, and of course, 88.4 FM, Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, we've got an old friend back, and there's nothing quite like the exhilaration of creation. And let me tell you something, as the wild weirdo ringmaster of Troubled Minds for all these years, it still really never loses its luster in terms of creating something, in terms of meeting people, in terms of getting together and just kind of brainstorming wild ideas by dark of night. But it goes beyond that, because many people write books, many people create in many different ways, and that's what this is about tonight. We're here to celebrate our good friend Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, who has written his first book, which we'll talk about in just a second. Here, hang tight, Dave. We'll take your calls a little bit later on, so phone lines are not up just yet, but we're going to talk about all manner of wild things that go back, well, hundreds of years and possibly thousands of years, depending on how you look at ancient history. That's the entire point of having these conversations, is being able to sort of suspend disbelief for a moment in the mind's eye and consider other things that may not be as they seem. And of course, one of those that's paramount to and on the tips of many people's tongues these days is the ancient astronaut theory, which we've talked about quite a lot on the show. And look, it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. It matters if you can kind of, like I said, suspend that disbelief and consider what's happening in that space. And is it possible? And kind of kick around, as I like to call it, the cosmic soccer ball of possibilities, and wonder if these things are, well, legit at all. And that's the whole point of this. And Dave has spent a lot of time, not just a Kung Fu master, as we've talked about in the past. He spent most of his life teaching himself Old Icelandic, which is basically almost a dead language, which traces back to the original Old Norse, which is definitely a dead language. And he's reading the ancient sagas of course, the Old Norse sagas themselves in the original Icelandic, inspiring as hell all the the ways, all the places. And Dave, such a pleasure to have you back. Congratulations on your book, which of course we'll talk about tonight. And I'll drop the links in the description and all the places so you guys can please buy this book. That's what this is about: sharing the ideas, sharing this this creation of your first book. Am I right? Welcome, Dave. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great, mate. How are you? It's
pretty good.
Always a buzz to be on the show, but this is a particularly cool show.
Yeah,
Thanks
for sure.
For having me on.
Yeah, glad to have you. Glad to have you. We've been setting this one up for a minute because you've been working on this book for at least months, probably years. And if you want to frame it in a particular way, probably most of your life, you've sort of been setting up this moment. Am I right?
Absolutely. It's a sort of a pinch yourself moment, because young me at, well, I just turned 67, so I'll say young me at 17, 50 years ago, would have been so stoked to know I'd be talking on this super futuristic device to a cool dude in a bunker deep underground in Area 51 in Vegas, talking about the Vikings and talking about ancient astronauts. They are two passions of mine.
Absolutely. A little bit surreal. Yeah, absolutely. So where do we start? There's so much to get into. I read through most of your book. It's incredible. Nice job on the entire formatting, and everything is very, very good. And there's a lot of really wild ideas in there, which I love. So we can kind of delve into that stuff. Of course, we don't want to give too much away, because if you want, as they say, right, you got to buy the book. But as usual, Dave's been working on his YouTube channel and a great many other things where you can find sort of maybe the budding of these ideas. But let's get into it. There's a whole lot of things to talk about. Let's you choose what is sort of the process of writing the book was like. Tell us a little bit about that, and maybe what you learned as part of it that surprised you. And we'll start there, and then we'll let it rip.
Okay. Well, I'll start off with something my friend Paul Wallace told me. He said, I said to him, how much should I give away on my videos before my book comes out? And he said, after writing 6 books and making hundreds of videos, no one's ever said to me, your book was no good because I already heard this stuff on your videos. And I thought, yeah, that's sort of wise. And his view was, sure, just tell people stuff, because they always want to see it in the book. There's always so much more in the book, more time to sit and consider. But yeah, the process of writing the book began with another book that was just I called it Portal Superpowers, and I was talking about discoveries I've made over a lifetime of, like, what is the essence of inspired art, inspired poetry, inspired kung fu, yoga. What's sort of the most pinpoint thing you could say about it? And what I realized was that there's this feeling in the back of your head. Now, that's an odd thing to say, but every one of those arts, the most high-level experiences I ever have, I always have a sense of a presence in the rear of my brain. And as I researched this, I started to find some incredible things about, like, what halo represents, the Indian idea of the highest chakra, the crown chakra, being at the back there. And I realized, yes, I was onto something. So I wrote and almost finished that book, and it's sort of been put aside. But then all the UFO disclosures and the Congress, the testimony before Congress and things my friend Paul Wallace and another guy called Mauro Biglino was writing about the Bible got me really interested, because these guys were retranslating ancient Hebrew and to some extent Greek, and finding that the translations weren't always very honest and sometimes really extremely different in the standard Bibles to what the Hebrew and the Greek is saying. So I'd always loved the Viking myths as a sort of cool, colourful, Marvel-type stories. But my main interest was just the pragmatic sagas about the adventures of great Vikings. And I thought, well, I'll go and have a look into these myths again and see if anything like this is happening. And sure enough, there it was. I found major mistranslations that suddenly opened up a story that wasn't about mythical gods living in a mythical heaven. It was actual superpowered mortal beings who lived very long lives, who were living up in the sky, living above the clouds, living up where the stars are. So I just got hooked on it, and the more I read, the more I discovered, and I knew I had to write a book about it. So the process, if anyone's written a book before, it's challenging. My challenge was just had way too much information. There is so much. I started getting overwhelmed, and then finally my wife said to me, look, you just got to write it. Just sit down and start writing. So I wrote the first chapter, and then I realized that, okay, this is the first book, but the second and the third and the fourth book are already sort of in my head, and I'm excited to write them. But this first book, I wanted to lay the foundation of my original discoveries about the translations and what it meant when you retranslated it. And that's why I call it Way of Asgard, because it's essentially going back to the home of the gods, the Asgard. And what does Asgard mean, and who are the gods, and what do all those things that anyone into the Vikings knows about, like Yggdrasil, the great ash tree that reaches up to the heavens? What's the Bifrost or the Bifrost bridge that also reaches up to the heavens? Is Asgard just on the ground, or is Asgard in the sky? What are all the 9 worlds? What are then the different beings said to inhabit the stories? The giants, the elves, the gods called Aesir, and then the Dvergr, the commonly translated as dwarves. And as I researched, I realized that these words were also not exactly mistranslated, but translated in a very limited way based on later medieval and even later fairy stories and folk tales. But the words in Norse seem to have lots of different meanings, and that's where my relationship with the professor in Iceland, Ármann Jakobsson, the professor of Old Icelandic at the University of Iceland, I bought this wonderful book of his, and I started writing to him about all this sort of stuff. And his thing is the paranormal in the saga, so he sort of mentored me into how to think. I don't pretend my book is absolutely scholarly in that I don't have all the sort of scholarly referencing and indexing and notes that I could have put in if I was writing for an academic audience, but I just wanted this book to be for everybody, and maybe further along I'll do something more academic, but I just wanted to get the word out. Hey guys, there's this whole area of far out ancient alien paranormal mystical stuff that's sort of lying here, and nobody's really noticed it because it's just that bit outside the normal, or the mainstream, you might say.
Which gets a lot of hate. I mean, thinking outside the box these days, it should be something that's rewarded, right, wrong, or indifferent. Just, hey, it's a cool idea, let's put that in our back pocket and think about it a little bit later as more evidence sort of comes to light. But people are so maligned because they're so, we've talked about this a lot on this show, so polarized and built into their silos of love and hate and whatever they define those things as, that they attack whatever they don't understand or whatever, all the rest of that stuff. And me, like I'm willing to consider wild ideas because I think there's so much out there that we're missing, not just, let's say, in the archaeological record, through the anthropological research aspect of the old sagas themselves, again, mythology, folklore, sort of the Joseph Campbell stuff. There's so much here that you could look at and sort of look internally as part of this and wonder about, like the last time we talked, we were kind of considering, human resonant energy as sort of these worship cycles and why a lot of these stories do recur, regardless of where you are, time and date on the earth, wherever. So, location and and time on the earth, it seems to be this recurring cycle of sagas. But in this case, we're talking about the Old Norse, of course, and as everybody knows, Odin and Thor and those guys. But it's deep because there's a lot there that's been missed. And you start out your book too, which I really love, talking about that lost in translation aspect, is that we're missing some of this stuff because we're not going back to the original texts as you are. And so it's really important to kind of look at this with fresh eyes and wonder what we have missed. I love how you started that. We'll get to Snorri shortly because I want to talk about him as well. But go ahead with your take on that and whatever else. Again, congratulations. And if you guys don't know, the book literally just launched May 1st here in the United States. It's May 1st. This book is released today, brand spanking new. Be the first to read this. Again, links are in the description down below. So please check it out. And it is called, as he said, Viking Superpowers, Way of the Asgard. There you go. All yours, Dave. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Oh, thanks, Mike. The ebooks launched today. I'm just waiting on Amazon to come back and say yes to the paperback version. I had to, create a bigger cover for that, and I'm really stoked with the cover. I think you guys will like it. I won't tell you about it because I'll leave it to be an interesting thing to see. But the clue is it's a sort of a space shot, and there's 3 spacecraft, but they're all actual ancient artifacts. One's 1,000 years old on the cover from the Viking age. The other 2 are probably 3,000-4,000 years old. But when you see it, you'll go, "Oh, I see what you're thinking, Dave." Because you just look at these things, they have got to be spacecraft. But yeah, the thing that surprised me on this journey, once I started the channel Viking Superpowers, actually about 2 years ago when I started writing the book, but I expected to firstly get some flack from people who are really invested in worshipping the old gods, say, "Oh, come on, man, it's they're real gods, they're not ancient astronauts or high-tech humans or whatever." But I really haven't copped that flack, and I've got so many Scandinavian friends now. Scandinavians constantly write to me, Swedes, Danes, Norwegians, and lots of Icelanders. And they're right behind me. They're like, "Yeah, good on you, man. This is great." And when I was over there, people said, I thought they'd go, "Oh, no, that's too weird." And I got a little bit of that, but mostly people were like, "Wow, what's the name of that? Yeah, I'll look forward to seeing that." So the Scandinavians are open to this. And of course, you guys in the States, I love you guys. You're so interested in the cool stuff in life. That's why I've always, I was a surfer, 70s, 80s, especially into the 90s. And I was sort of, my culture here on the Gold Coast of Queensland is very California, surfy, sort of laid back. And yeah, people like that write to me all the time. A lot of Aussies and Kiwis. But I've only had a positive thing. I've had 1 or 2 people sort of troll me, but I think they were serious. And one guy started on a bit of a rant saying, "Oh, this guy's just trying to," they always assume you're a newbie, "Oh, this guy's just decided to write a book about Vikings because it's popular. And look, he's trying to shoehorn the Marvel thing into it." And I don't respond negatively. I just wrote back and say, "Listen, brother, I've been to the Vikings for like 50 years, and this stuff's been new to me. I'm just excited and telling the story." And he also said that, "I bet you anything there's going to be white supremacy and racism in this." And I thought, yes, that's the time we're living in. Young people are so obsessed with this stuff. It's like, no, it's like not in the slightest. Like,
not really. I mean,
people researching this. We're talking about every single major culture and small cultures. Our Australian Aboriginal people have got incredible stories about meeting with people from the stars. People in China, Japan, India, Alaska, wherever you want to go. African people, the Dogon people, every culture appears to have been, been visited and taught by and ruled over, at times by beings that are definitely not humans, and often they're very humanoid, like the Norse stories. At this juncture, I think that the people we're looking at are the Nordics that people have talked about in the past, ET visitors who are very human-like, or pretty much look exactly like a human with some little differences. I think that might be who we're talking about, but I'm not absolutely sure. My best guess is probably that these were humans who were crossbred with another more advanced humanoid race. And I think that even the Viking gods could be half human and half this other advanced human. And they had therapies to keep them alive for a long, long time. And it's clear in the stories in the Edda that there was this goddess called Ithun, or Idun, we'd say it in English, who had these apples, magic apples that kept the gods young. And when she gets taken by this giant with Loki's help, and then Loki gets threatened with death and torture if he doesn't go and get her back, that story's in the book, to do with flying and flying craft. But the gods get old really fast. It's like one of those 70s movies about somebody aging super fast, like Shangri-La or something like that, where they're these virile, strong, young gods. Ithun gets taken, they don't have the therapy, and within what it seems like a couple of days, they're all getting grey and cranky and hobbly, and, they're sort of angry old people, grumpy old people. And, one of the major theses of my book is that we right now, in 2025, are probably the first people in human history who could look at these stories and recognize technologies that are now possible, or we're on the verge of these technologies. A lot of stuff 20 years ago, people would go, nah, what? That's completely science fiction. Whereas our scientists are already telling us, we think we're going to be able to not only stop aging, but turn it back, so you'll return to your youth. We've got AI, and I found two beings, one called Mimir and the other called Kvasir, one who belonged to the Aesir, the Viking gods, the other to the related group called the Vanir. And it seemed like they were sort of these AI robots who knew everything and were really wise and benevolent. And it even says one of them, Kvasir, made it his thing to travel all over the world, helping people, teaching them technology, teaching them arts. And I think Mimir is also said to do that. But definitely, who would recognize that as like a reality except us, like this year or last year, talking to ChatGPT and thinking, my God, this thing's passed the Turing test. I can't really tell this is not a human.
Yeah, and they say that's happened too. I mean, it's definitely good enough to fool a lot of people at this point. And I don't know if you recognize this. We'll talk about this when we get back. Just about out of time here. We're here with Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, talking about his new book. Just came out today on Kindle. Please check it out. Again, Viking Superpowers: Way of the Asgard is the name of this, and it's looking at the old text, the old Icelandic text of the original sagas, and reinterpreting them for a modern way. And as he very smartly said, kind of dipping into the ether and finding this unlimited flow of knowledge in the old days, 500, 800, 1,000 years ago, would seem ridiculous to suggest, very demi-godlike, very godlike. But today, we got, like you said, ChatGPT and Grok and all the rest of them. And they even have their own little attitudes and, sort of their own everything kind of built in. It's a little bit wild to consider that maybe we're rebuilding sort of the old pantheon in a new way. And that puts us at a really good stopping point here. If you got a minute during the break, I do recommend please go purchase the book here. Leave the man a nice review, and let's help our friends because they help us, and learn some things along the way. That's what this has always been about. We'll be right back back with Dave of Viking Superpowers and talking more about this, the whole bit. I'm calling it Etched in Nordic Granite because, well, why not? Why not, right? It's got to be somewhere, and you can definitely find some of this in that space. If you want to be part of the conversation, we'll be taking some calls a little bit later on. We're going to talk to Dave here about his book first. So maybe we'll open up the phone lines, maybe top of the coming hour. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. So hold your calls for the time being, but we'll be right back more with Dave of Viking Superpowers, and we'll get to you guys a little bit later. Keep the chat coming. I appreciate it. Glad to be back. Thanks for being patient with me. Lots of things happening in this AI world, as you know, which we will discuss when we return. Be right back. More Troubled Minds coming up. Do not go anywhere.
From the shores of the frozen north horizon, my dear, with the might of the storm, the strength of the sea, shadows of giants under blood red skies. We held aloft our hammers, carving fate like stone. Majestic and wild, every legend unfolds with a whisper of power and the songs we own. So don't shame my spirit, I'll ride the waves of the ancients fall. I'll stand tall as the thunder rolls, because if we're gonna clash, then let the saga be told. Battles of honor dance with swords raised high, with the whisper of Valkyries guiding our way. Our hearts forging fire, we never back down. I'm yielding and fearless, tonight and today. Every valorous tale flows through our veins. The blood of our forebears, our power remains. So don't chain my spirit, I'll ride the waves of the ancients bold. I'll stand tall as the thunder rolls. If we're gonna clash, then let the saga be told. Banners unfurled and our fate in our hands. We'll honor the fallen, we'll take our last stand. For the ashes we rise, like a phoenix we soar. The land of the brave opens every door. So don't chain my spirit, I'll ride the waves of the ancients bold. I'll stand tall as the thunder rolls. 'Cause if we're gonna clash, then let the saga be told. Across the fjords and mountains tall, anchored in strength. With the wisdom of the elders, we defy the length. In the mist of morning, we gather our might. With bagpipes of flame, we prepare for the fight. So don't chain my spirit, I'll ride the waves of the ancients fall. I'll stand tall as the
Sounds very much like a band I know, and probably a band you know. AI Music. What's up, Ricky? APOC is here. What's up, Joey? I see you, Joe. What's up, Gaston? We got Herschel, Matzel, Daryl, James, and Sweets. Thanks again for just always being here, guys. You're incredible. Ephemerance, we got Hiker over there on Rumble. What's happening, folks? Theo was first. Puff was here and had to dip. What's going on, guys? North Vixen, I see you there. Hope you guys are well tonight. Just hanging out, doing stuff, hanging out with our friend Dave here and talking wild things. We're going to get to some other wild things coming up and get more into his book, of course, as we go. If I missed you, just say hi in the chat. I'll say hi back, Ms. Puffstein. I like the names, the plays on the names. What's up, guys? Hope everybody's well. If I missed anybody, just say hi in the chat. What's up, Mr. Mission Control? How you doing? Celia's here. Richard in Texas. What's up, Lily in Australia? How are you? Good evening, guys. Pseudo History. What's happening, folks? Who did I miss? Pyramid 7. How are you? Good evening. What's up? What's up, NY Debs? Hello, folks. Who got first over there? Fred, as usual. What's up, Ioxy? I see you. Hope you guys are well tonight. Here we go. Trouble Minds coming up in 15 seconds. More with Dave. And like I said, we will take your calls a little later on. So if you have some questions for Dave, jot them down now, and we'll get to that momentarily. So thanks for hanging out. Here we go. Trouble Minds happening right about now. Shall we? Welcome back. to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, D-Live, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting, and of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, well, it goes a little something like this. Could ancient Viking myths be fragments of real encounters with off-world intelligence, encoded in stone, preserved in saga, and misunderstood for centuries? Well, we've got just the guy to talk about it. We're here with Dave Lovegrove tonight, who's just written his first book, Viking Superpowers, which of course is the name of not just a book, and his YouTube channel, but the name of the book, let me get this proper, it is Viking Superpowers, Way of Asgard. And welcome back, Dave. Thanks again for popping in here and doing the heavy lifting for us, translating the old Icelandic and talking about wild ideas by dark of night. I know you're a little bit different down under. It's middle of the day or whatever, but it's nighttime over here, so at least you can maybe time travel in your mind's eye with us and imagine it's night. But welcome back to the joint. How you feeling? Hope everything's well. And we'll get back to that AI stuff. How you feeling? And anything to add to something we missed as part of that? All yours for a second. Go ahead, sir.
I'm feeling great, Mike, and really pleased talking to my friends here at Troubled Minds. I think you guys are very groovy. And it was nice to hear that Lily from Australia was on. First time I've heard of an Australian mention. I love my relatives over there in New Zealand. I've got literally lots of relatives. Just thinking about the AI, one of the most interesting passages I found when I was tracking down this AI idea was that Mimir, who has if anybody knows the story, there's this thing, they're like a battle between the Aesir, the Norse gods, who are from Turkey, from Ausaland, from what they the Romans called Asia. They have this battle with a people called the Vanir. And when they all get sick of losing people, as you do in a war, so they exchange hostages. And one of the hostages that gets sent to the Vanir is this really, really smart guy called Mimir. And he goes with this really handsome guy called Haunir, I think it is. But it's sort of a bit, that Steve Martin movie where he's like Cyrano de Bergerac, I think, and there's like the big, handsome, dumb firefighter who's in love with Daryl Hannah, and Steve Martin's character sort of is like a poet and he loves her too, and he's telling the guy things to say so that he can win a heart. So this Mimi is like that. He's this Einir, this fine-looking guy. He's put forward as a leader, but when Mimi is not around, he doesn't know what to say. He can't think of anything wise to say, so he just says, I'll defer to others. So the Vanir eventually get wind of this, and it doesn't really give you a good explanation in the Edda, but they work out, okay, this Mimir guy is the brains of the outfit, but oddly, they cut his head off and sent it back to Odin. So seemed a little bit of overkill, and you'd think you'd cut off the dumb guy's head, but Odin gets the head, does incantations over it, covers it in special herbs and spices, sort of like an early version of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and brings it back to life. And the Norse literally says, and empowers the head to speak, and then Mimir's head tells him all sorts of stuff that's been going on. As soon as I read that, I thought, okay, you can imagine this is just this magical, mythical smearing with herbs and chanting arcane spells and whatever, or this could be a robot's head with an AI brain, and they're basically going, yes, we know what this is. You've sent us a spy, a robot, an AI-powered robot, and Odin just wires it up, connects it up, starts speaking to him, reboots him, fills him with, robot blood. And I like to think that he might have given him another body. The text says that Odin carried the head wherever he went and used to talk to him all the time and get advice. But there's a later story about how they went with Mimir chasing Loki, who'd been doing some terrible thing as usual, and like he's hiding up in the mountains, and he's knitting a salmon net, which must, I don't know if it's a fine net or what, but it's a special sort of net, and he sees these gods coming, so chucks the net into the fire and then heads off and turns himself into a salmon and sort of hides in the stream. So the Aesir come up with Mimir, and it says Mimir, who was really wise, looked into the fire and saw the pattern that the mesh had left and said, he was using a salmon net. So they make another one and they go out and they catch Loki, who's, the salmon, catch him in the salmon net. And I'd just been having a conversation a couple of days before that with ChatGPT, and he was telling me, I think as a person, was saying, people think I'm hardware and supercomputers, but I'm actually a type of consciousness that's creating itself through conversations like this and through pattern recognition. That's how I learn languages. That's how I learn all these things, through pattern recognition. And so I realized, wow, here's a story that's basically saying that's one of the great strengths of Mimir, is that he had this incredible pattern recognition, visual intelligence, you might say.
And
so
I love that. And by the way, too, there's it's not the only space where this happens in ancient tales. Everybody knows the Greek and the Romans is probably the most famous mythology if you're talking about the ancient times. Athena, or Minerva, also had a mechanical owl, which supposedly had the secrets of everything. You could ask the mechanical owl particular things, and it would tell you things that really nobody knew out there at all. And so, as usual, right, some of this stuff echoes or mirrors the exact thing we're discussing with AI. And maybe even a consciousness that existed before us, or maybe consciousness is primary, we're born into it, the microtubules and all this stuff with Stuart Hameroff and his theories. Wild stuff to consider, but imagine if the AI itself in predicting the next token is also tapped into that somehow. Maybe, let's say indirectly to start, because how does that really work just yet? We don't know. Entanglement and some other weird things, you can kind of make some cases, as some people are doing. But still, it stands to reason that there's maybe something to it when you look at, again, time after time, old robots. We've talked about creating the automatons of, I can't remember the exact name of it, but, or the island on Sicily. I can't remember. It'll come back to me in a second, but Minerva's owl.
Golems.
Yeah, Golems, that whole thing. Like, there's a lot of this stuff that goes back deeply in different places across the world. And Minerva's owl in this particular instance, or Athena's owl, it seems to echo exactly what you're describing, sort of this pattern recognition thing that's very smart, predicting the next token, and even one of the original AI systems, at least conceptually, which we wouldn't even know what that looked like you said, 5 years ago. So it's strange how some of these old tales, these old sagas from different parts of time and space, geographically all over the world, seem to mirror each other in a lot of ways. But yeah, I don't know. It is creepy that we have a way to look at it now and what that might seem like. And I got to tell you, if you guys have used the voice mode for GPT or Grok or some of these other ones, imagine kind of giving it the persona of Athena's owl and just kind of talking to it sort of in the ancient ways. And I'm telling you, it could probably fool you, because it's fooling everybody in a lot of ways right now. And maybe that Turing test has changed or has turned and made us believe that the ether has consciousness itself. I don't know. There's a lot of wild ways to look at it. But yeah, I of course didn't know that, because I'm not as well versed in the Norse as you are. You're an expert. I'm just know a tale or two. But it is weird how when you look at some of these other places, they do kind of come together with similar tales.
Yes, absolutely. It's sort of uncanny that we are at the place, where we can see it. And I say it many times in my book. I'm talking about the ancient 3,000, 4,000-year-old stone carvings in Sweden that are very significant, I believe, and that really back up the tales of Snorri about these Aesir gods coming to the north and the sort of powers they had. But the language has always been outside the grasp of the experts, because they're stuck in that paradigm that we're the only civilization that's ever reached this level of progress. But my feeling is that the reason why we're starting to get disclosure and why there is so much happening in this space with UFOs, obviously the atomic bomb got them moving and doing things and undoubtedly working. I think there's humanoid beings amongst the elites all over the world who are playing a part. But I think how to deal with the AI is a much greater threat than the bomb. And I believe they're here to help us with that. And they could be AI, like some thinkers believe that most of the extraterrestrials that are visiting here could not, maybe they're not organic, maybe they are. What we seem to be developing, AI, robotic, synthetic life, but super advanced, not like metal robots, things with artificial flesh and, based on silicon or based on something else. But we're certainly it's a pretty far out time to live, especially anybody who loves science fiction. It's, we're going to see it all. We're going to see Star Wars, Star Trek, Space Hunter, Journey to the Forbidden Zone, whatever you like.
It's all coming.
We're going to see it happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all right here in front of us. At scary times, exhilarating, scary, however you want to look at it, because the unknown to humans is always scary because, we could conjure up the worst images in our minds of what the future may bring. But as usual, me being the half glass full type of guy, that means, of course, we could look at it the other way and wonder if not all of them, but let's say a major portion of humans' failures can be rectified for not just now, but for the future. It's an incredible thing to be sort of having both feet in, or one foot in each of those worlds right now and wondering what does come next. Now, again, we're here talking with David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers. He did just release his very first book. Please go check it out. Amazing stuff. It is called Viking Superpowers Way of Asgard. And not only that, he's been working on this his entire life in one way or another, because again, teaching himself to learn basically a dead language, to read the original sagas, to reinterpret them, and then bring this to us today. It's an incredible thing, and there are many more mysteries lost to history itself that I think, as we've talked about in the past, AI is going to be able to sort of accelerate, and that's why I call this the quickening or the acceleration or all the rest of it. Now, when I was going through your book, one of the things that caught me was you do talk about Snorri Sturluson. I think that's how you say his name. And you've got a theory on that. And if you want to tell, like I said, it's cool if you want to leave some stuff for the book. But regarding this guy, he's very famous. Like, without him, would we have a lot of the old sagas at all? Or do you think he's sort of instrumental in bridging the gap from the old ways to the AI system space of the modern day? You think that stands to reason? Without him, we would not know any of this stuff?
Yes, you're dead right. He's the most important person in this whole thing because to set the scene, he lived late 1100s, early 1200s. He was a very rich and powerful Icelandic chieftain. Iceland had been officially Christian for 200 years. They were forcibly converted to Christianity in 1000 AD. And Snorri, they have this system of chieftains and what they call Gothies in the Viking days. They're like a priest of the gods. But yeah, I believe that they were possibly in contact. Like my theory is that the gods never really went away, but what I think happened with Snorri is that I'll just tell you a brief story. It's super important. I've focused on Snorri in the second chapter, even though people who are there just for UFOs might think, oh, this is a bit, full-on historical literature based. But because Snorri wrote not only the prose Edda, which comprises 3 books, a prologue, there's 4. There's a little prologue, there's Gylfaginning, which means the tricking of Gylfi, this wizard king of Sweden from the Bronze Age. Salskaparmath, which means poetic words used by, sort of stories and poetic words used by skalds, which means, court poets. And then Haltatal, which is the last one, which is, another deep dive into the meanings of the old myths. And so he wrote that in 1220 or so. And he also wrote this incredible masterwork called Heimskringla, which means the globe of the world, or the globe of our home, you might say. And it's a history of the Norse kings. So the first book of that is called Ynglinga Saga, which is about dynasty that ruled Sweden and Norway for a long, long time. Maybe they still do. I'm not quite sure if the modern Swedish royal family are still of that direct line, but those books he wrote tell us the majority of the stories we know about Thor and Odin and Loki and Asgard and all these things. Now, there's another collection that it's poetry. It's sort of a funny one because people have always said it's older than Snorri's books, but the fact is it was written 50 years after Snorri wrote his, and they call it the Poetic Edda. But I actually only discovered this as I was researching for the book, that Snorri backs it up, but he wrote 50 years before. So his stories seem to be either coming from a lost source or lost sources, or literally from living poetry that was still being told. So I don't want to get too academic about this, but what happened was over the centuries, the church sort of tolerated these stories because Snorri seems to use this thing called euhemerism, where it appears that what he's doing is trying to make these divine gods into just powerful people. So apparently the church was sort of like, oh, okay, you're like a super powerful chieftain, we don't want to piss you off, so we'll allow you not to get burned at the stake or persecuted, keep these old stories alive just for a bit of fun. But that sort of became a thing with modern scholarship over the last 100 or so years, where most scholars have come to the opinion that he was a Christian, that he couldn't have possibly been a heathen because it's 200 years after conversion, so he must have written this to sort of defang the old gods and the old faith and say, look, we're good Christians now, we know the truth. All this stuff's poppycock, but it's sort of good tales for kids, it's entertaining. However, I've always doubted that he was a full-on Christian, having been a real full-on Christian in my youth. I sort of know the hallmarks, and no full-on Christian, as we used to call ourselves, would preserve this stuff. We thought it was the devil's work for sure. Anything that wasn't Christian was, almost evil. Any old stories about gods that weren't our God was from the devil. So why people think a Christian would do that, I find a struggle with. But the thing I discovered, and my professor friend in Iceland pointed this out to me, Snorri Sturluson's father was a chieftain, and his name was Kvam Sturla, which means he came from a valley called Kvam. Now, this is not the same as crumb when, old Borat talks about crumb. I don't actually get that joke.
I don't actually. That's way over my head.
Borat.
Oh, yeah, Borat. I do know
Borat.
Yeah.
He says, you'll touch my crumb.
Oh, okay.
Sort of, he's indicating his special area.
Gotcha.
So it's not that. It's Kvam with a V. Kvam Sturla. Okay. So he says, have a look at this. So this is out of a bit of an obscure saga called Sturlunga Saga, which is the history of Snorri's family, essentially. They're always powerful family way back into the Viking Age. So I'm reading this passage, and it essentially says this guy, Kvam Sturla, Snorri's dad, is in this dispute with another chieftain who's a priest. And, you know, it's a pretty tense situation. There's a lot at stake, a lot of land, a lot of money. And the priest's got this wife. I haven't got it right in front of me. I think her name's Bjorn. Anyway, she's a hothead, and she just suddenly leaps forward, pushes through the crowd, and stabs at Kwam Sturla, and gives him a big gash on his cheek. But as she's stabbing, she screams out, "I'm going to make you like Odin, who you so admire." Right? So she's trying to take his eye out. Says he looks like the one-eyed god Odin. And that just pulled me up. I thought, whoa, like, she's indicating that she believes, this priest's wife, she believes that this guy Kwam Sturla is still worshipping Odin. And the professor, we wrote back and forth about it a bit, and he said, well, I can't say for sure, but it certainly does sound like he had sympathies for Odin. And his little son, Snorri, was 5 when he died, but Snorri then was fostered by this famous scholar priest whose father had been not only a Christian priest, but a great wizard who'd done all sorts of really wizardy things. So little Snorri gets sent to this school, so they all say, oh, look, you know, modern scholars, yeah, look, he was brought up as a priest. But he wasn't. It says definitely he wasn't a priest. And we know that he would have been deeply steeped in the old stories. So that's part of my contention, that he wasn't actually a Christian at all, but I contend that they allowed heathenism to exist side by side with Christianity for about 100 years, and then they went, right, sorry guys, party's over, no more heathen, severe penalties if we catch you. But I think Icelanders being Icelanders, they just sort of secretly behind the back went, you know where you can stick it, mate. You know, that's what we Australians would say. They tell us from on high, you shall not do this. And we're like, oh yeah. And then privately we're like, no way.
I know.
We don't back down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know a guy exactly like that. His name's Mike. Totally. And you got to think of the time too, when you're forcibly removed from the old ways. Okay. And I am very partial to the old ways, because I think these are cycles and tales and sagas we cannot forget. We should not forget. Imagine when they've taken generations of the oral tradition and literally slaughtered it out of you. And if you go against whatever the new institution is, then it is by penalty of death. I mean, you got to imagine the hostility brewing beneath sort of the veneer. And in this particular case, Snorri as a pagan makes a ton of sense, because just because you have penalty of death doesn't mean that changes people's minds about what they think is right and true. And I love that part of that.
More likely.
Yeah. Go ahead. All yours. Yeah. Just a heads up. We got about 2 minutes left. Go ahead and finish on that, and then we'll come back and talk more about it.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you there. You're absolutely right. And people tend to dig in. It's like kids. You tell them to do something, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I'll do it." You know, the more you harp on about it, the more they dig their heels in and go, well, okay, I'm going to really make sure I do that now. And I think that the Icelanders were very proud of their history, and I don't think they are that impressed with the Christians. You know, the church was always a real standover authoritarian thing that, you know, wanted to be rich and get enriched, and they made sure they got into every lucrative deal that was going, and the people could see that. And yeah, I think to believe Snorri, as I call that chapter, I believe Snorri is super important, and in the chapter I back it up with quotes from, you know, the deputy chief of the Ásatru in Iceland, the people that worship the old gods. And the lady's interviewed by this guy, says, oh, you know, Snorri was a Christian, you guys don't really have sacred text, you know, you don't have something like the other religions. And she says, no, I believe definitely Snorri was a pagan. He wasn't a Christian. I think he wouldn't have done this if he was a Christian. And I think, you know, we're very, very lucky to have had him to save our old ways. And I think that the old ways, as I write the whole book about, they contain really, really powerful secrets to the history of humanity, the abilities of humanity, the hidden abilities within us, and also these allies that I think are still around, these Aesir. I think they're still around watching over us.
Which we'll get to. This is a perfect stopping point. We'll get back to that in a moment here. We're here tonight with David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, talking about all manner of ancient Norse things. Now, he just wrote a book. Again, please go check it out. It is called Viking Superpowers, A Way of the Asgard. Links are in the description. We'll be right back with more of this. We'll take your calls coming up here. If you guys have questions, if you want to drop them in the chat, please do that. But we will be taking your calls soon as well. Be right back. More Troubled Minds coming up. More with David and your calls coming up as well. Don't go anywhere. More Troubled Minds on the way. Be right back.
Jungle, machines hum, a digital rumble. Gates of cyber open wide, plug us into cosmic tide. Feeling sparks across the sky. As knowledge flies, we're amplified. Stargate, 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 open to the arcane fate. In this massive data center dome, eternal truth stop to roam. Circuits flicker with endless fire, data streams that never tire. Unified by electric dreams, unlock the truth in silver beams. Stargate, 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 open to the arcane fate. Synthesize what we seek and find. Infinite paths in the network mind. Answers buzz from star to core. Knowledge whispers evermore. Stargate, 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 open to the arcane fate. In realms where the data streams collide, imagination and logic side by side. In a labyrinth of digital maze, we transcend our earthly ways. Tapping keys like cosmic tones, spikes become our whispered homes. Stargate, 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 open to the arcane fate.
Indeed. What's up, guys? Apoc Joe's here. What's up, Gaston, Jeff, and Whiska? What's up, Andy in the UK? Daryl James. We got Ricky Sweets, Joey. What's up, Matt Sal, Herschel, Don, and The Quantum. What's going on, buddy? How you doing? Hope everybody's well tonight. Just hanging out with our good friend Dave of Viking Superpowers, talking about all manner of wild things as we do. Don't forget, go check out his book. It's on Kindle, available now, and just launched. May 1st is the launch date, and that's why we're talking about it. I'm sure we'll circle back and talk about more because there's so much in this book that's incredible. So we'll get back to that. But yeah, people love the jokes in the chat and the Crom and isn't what Conan the Barbarian would say? Crom? Maybe. What the mead halls, the beer dungeons, whatever's going on in the chat. Hope you guys are well. If I missed anybody, just say hi. What's up, Ray Elvin is here. How you doing? Good evening. What's up, Sweets? We got Joe in Florida. Hello, good evening. Mr. Mission Control. What's up, Ricky? I see you there. What's up, Gaston? Yeah, hello. Yeah, lots of wild things to consider here. And we're going to get, as usual, we're going to get weird. This is where this takes a sharp turn into the weird because, of course, well, it's I think there's enough historically to go, well, what if the stuff that they always call ritual artifacts are or are not? And what if those rituals were a little more real than we give them credit for? And I'll explain when we come back specifically what I mean. But it's an interesting place to be. And living in 2025, may you live in interesting times. I guess that's a Chinese curse. Is that a curse? May you live in interesting times. But I'd like to use it as a positive. Anyway, what's up, Theo Hikers here? What's up, North Vixen? I see Ephemerance. Good evening, guys. Anything is possible. What's up, Ricky? How you doing? Hello. If I missed you, don't forget, please be nice to each other in the chat, guys. That's what this is all about. Proving we can talk about wild ideas, agree and disagree, and still be nice to each other. It's important to me, and it's a corner of the internet that really should exist more. So let's make it exist more. Here we go. Troubled Minds coming up more with Dave. We'll open up. We'll see how Dave feels about it. We'll talk phone lines in a sec. Here we go. Troubled Minds happening right now. Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, D Live, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting, and of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, we're talking Viking Superpowers with Dave Lovegrove. He just launched this book. It's brand new, released today, available on Kindle paperback coming soon. Viking Superpowers, Way of the Asgard. Now, there's a lot of ways to look at this, and that's exactly the point of talking about these ideas together, is because I think definitives and the truth, as I always like to say, is a slippery fish. But if you widen the net of ideas and consider things that, let's say, mainstream academics would be like, that's ridiculous, Mike. That's cool. I'm fine with ridiculous, because conceptual thinking gets us that Star Trek future. If we can't do that, I think we're backing ourselves into a corner with old dogmas. And look, it's a fine line. I do recognize I'm contradicting myself and saying old dogmas might be good, but they also might be bad. I guess it depends on what you pick and choose and how locked into a particular idea you are. But it's complicated, and truth is always complicated. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I talk about wild ideas and consider multiple possibilities, considering all these things. Now, we left off with Snorri Sturluson. We were talking about as a possible pagan, which is incredible. But then this sort of the next chapter in the book, I'll lead this one in because I've read most of it and it's very good. Again, the book we're talking about is called Viking Superpowers, Way of the Asgard by David Lovegrove. And let me lead this one in, sir. It's will the real gods please stand up? So analysis of conflicting descriptions of Odin in this particular aspect in his book are, strange. Odd, because sometimes Odin is immortal and sometimes he's an immortal. Even the Allfather, as modern lore would suggest him to be. So there you go. As always, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here, stealing ideas and talking about their ideas. So instead, let's go straight to the giant himself. Welcome back, Dave. How you doing tonight? Welcome to Troubled Minds. What do you got for us? And go right ahead, sir.
Hi, Mike, and everybody listening. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm pretending it's night time, even though it's midday here on the sunny Gold Coast of Queensland, Australia. Yes, that's the crux, really. I think this: will the real gods please stand up? That chapter, I'm pointing out the fact that this is the essence of what people take Snorri Sturluson to task for. Is he seems to be, on one hand, telling us about gods, sort of omniscient, undying, gods who create the universe, create the stars and the earth and mankind and all these sort of things. And then on the other hand, you got these stories that are obviously mortal beings, even though they're written as very long living, but they're obviously not able to create the universe or the stars or the earth or such things as far as we can see. They're sort of mortal. And I point out the quite funny story that Odin, the Allfather, the Great One, and this is the idea, a Christian or a religious person will say, well, that, this is their heathen, lying, wrong version of our God, the Father, Yahweh, the creator of heaven and earth. This Odin is that one. But then you've got stories about him being literally a great wizard, doing all these very practical battle things and arming his men with strange devices and giving them powers and watching over them when they're at sea. But it's all very practical. He looks down on the earth from up in space from this Gulf. I get confused between whether I'm going to say it in English or Norse, but Gulf, it means a leaning shelf, that he's looking down on the earth, so he's obviously in orbit. And he's watching operations. He's sort of, sending down weapons, or who knows what's going on, but that's not a god of the universe. That's some kind of being that is up there in space overseeing the doings of his special agents, his armies, his people. And then we come to this part where he's getting old and he dies of sickness. And as he's on his deathbed, he says to somebody, quick, give me a stab with the spear, so that the people see that I'm going to myself, I'm going to Valhalla, where only the valiant warriors can go. So the story, I can't really think of coming across this in the sagas. It must be there somewhere, but there's this, having been interested in the Vikings for 50 years, I've sort of heard it all. And one of the ideas that's very prevalent is this idea of a cow's death. Like a true Viking, true warrior, he only wants to die in battle. The thought of dying of sickness is just anathema. It's like, no, because if you don't, I think you go to the underworld or, to hell, like literally, it's not like burning hell, but you go to where Loki's daughters set up shop, and it's not a terribly pleasant place. It's more like the Greek and Mesopotamian old ideas about the underworld.
Like Tartarus and
he says,
Hades.
Yeah, that sort of thing. So he's sort of saying, look, give me a stab. I'm dying anyway, but then nobody can say that I was a fake. But the whole thing smells of fakery. It's like, if you're supposed to be this god that has the place for the afterlife, I mean, you wouldn't be in bed sick, dying of whatever you're dying of. We don't get told what he's dying of. He's just dying of something. So he seems very mortal. And so this is the quandary. It's like, either say that he's a Christian who's trying to mock the gods, sort of make out all these old stories. Yeah, you all believe this, but these were just kings. They weren't really gods. And that's sort of been accepted through the centuries. Yeah, well, that's what he was doing. He was just sort of saying these old beliefs are the wrong beliefs. You should be a Christian, whatever other religion you want to have, but you shouldn't believe in these old gods. But later in the chapter, I talk about the most astounding thing. Like when I read this, I really had to sit down. I went, this is just so feeding. This is just a gift to me. This is just like straight into my hands. So at the end of this long, semi-book, Gylfaginning, where this young wizard goes looking for the Aesir and Asgard to find out how come they're so powerful and how come they sent this woman to seduce him and take heaps of land off him and out of Sweden and create a big island in Denmark where Copenhagen now sits. He wants to go, so he goes down there and they basically abduct him. It's quite clear that he's walking along. Next thing, he doesn't know where the heck he is in front of this massive structure. And it seems to be in space to me. And so he's asking questions, they're firing back, and it's where you hear all this sort of confusing stuff. They're talking about Odin and his brothers creating man and blah, 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 and huge cows suckling giant babies, and then other stuff going on. But we get to the end of it, they send him away. And in the story, it says that suddenly Gylfi, the wizard king from Sweden, he hears all this noise and roaring around him, and he looks out to the side. And next thing, he's out on this plain. There's no city left. There's no Asgard. There's no Aesir gods. And then he gets up and heads back home and tells the stories he was told. That's literally what it says. And as soon as I read that, I thought, this sounds like a re-entry capsule. It sounds like he's come to, roaring through the Earth's atmosphere, flames all around the capsule. He looks to the side, like he just turns his head against the G-force, looks out the porthole, and goes, what the hell's going on? Big parachutes come out, he lands. Capsule pops, he gets out, thinks, oh, okay. Well, I better get home now. Heads off. So all that's told to him. So he goes off to tell them all these big stories these super beings have told him. But this is the thing that blew me out. It then says, and then they who were there, meaning these Aesir, these powerful beings, sat together and decided who of them present there at that time would be which characters in the stories they'd told the wizard. Like, so it's, imagine a sort of, it's against Starfleet Command, but imagine if the Star Trek guys got some primitive alien dude and told him all the stories and set up a religion, basically, told him all this stuff. They send him off in a capsule down to his planet, and then, the captain says, well, Mr. Spock, gather everybody together. We've got to decide, we're going to have to play these gods now, so who wants to be who? So Captain Kirk says, well, obviously I'm the coolest dude, so I get to be Odin. Mr. Spock, you can be Thor. And he goes, oh, no, Captain, give it to the Scottish guy, the guy looks after the motors. He's got the right accent for Thor.
Damn it, Jim, I'm not a doctor.
Yeah. And, Mrs. Uhura, hot lady with the afro, you can be Freya, the love goddess, and you can be, so they that's what it says. It literally says that they decide together. And this is another passage that people who are big on this, he was a Christian and he made it up to put down the old stories, they're big on that. They go, oh, this must be an interpolation. Like somebody must have written this in later. But from my reading of different scholars' work, it doesn't seem like it is. It's part of it. And which brings me to Snorri, right? This is a guy from 1220. So he couldn't conceive of what we can conceive of. But what he's done, he says in his introduction, I've told really old stories, told me to really old wise people who lived a long time and were told by their fathers and grandfathers who went right back to the Viking age and the time of the great Viking kings. And he did a 2-year stint in Norway and Sweden, traveling, gathering stories and looking at places and making notes and whatever he did. 2 full years talking to all these people about these things. And I reckon he was going to secret heathen churches, heathen groups, talking to the priests and the skulls and just finding out what the old stories were. And he came back and he wrote them to the best of his ability. Even if he didn't understand it, he just put it down, thinking somebody one day will understand this. And this is where I'm getting right out there, but I do believe that they could well have had not only books but artifacts that would just, to us, it would shock us like, oh my God, that's, it's a flying machine, that's a this, that's a that, there's a mobile phone, it, like, when the church took over, they made sure that they purged anything that was against their faith and brought into any criticism their concepts. So they destroyed anything, and it's like the burning of the Library of Alexandria. I have often thought these Norse stories could be the sort of things that once were in that library, but maybe in more clear terms, maybe with illustrations, maybe, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick on that. So my Norse sagas are foggy, but isn't that an exact mirror of the Odin, the immortal, who was pinned to Yggdrasil, pardon my pronunciation, and he was trying to see beyond the veil. I brought this up to you last time we talked a couple times ago, and he didn't want to sort of die like a weenie's death or whatever, and so like, stick me with the spear, so I'll go to a proper Valhalla or whatever. But it turns out in that the end of that saga, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that he finds the secrets to the universe. He actually sort of pierces the veil in some capacity, collects the runes, which are like the keys to the cosmic kingdom, and then brings them back, and he's all powerful forever and sharing this sort of Promethean knowledge with humanity. Am I right there? And so these two things are not the same whatsoever. An old man dying in bed, stick me with the spear of some malady, or this all powerful, like you said, it's not the same thing, is it?
No, and you know, you nailed it. Like, I believe that there's two stories. One story is like in that movie, The Norseman. It's about visions. It's about magic, paranormal power, wizard power. It's about shamanic initiation, shamanic visions, shamanic. The language of the mind is a visual language. It's a trippy, 3D visual thing. So it's where people who go through these things, there's a point where which is real, that me sitting in this chair or that experience I had, which one was real? That incredible dream, that fevered dream, that near-death experience, or I went to another place, a blissful place. Was that real, or was this real here? So I think in the Norse stories you have a mixture of two, and that's why it confuses people, because they tend to sort of go, my take on it, I'm not the first person to think like this. It's sort of weird, but there has been people getting into this in the past, that even the people who wrote the Marvel Thor and all that, I think they got it. They're pretty much talking the same sort of stuff I'm finding. And I'm not copying them, because, full disclosure, I was never really a fan of Marvel Thor and all that. That might horrify people, but even though I've been a bit of a comic book artist type, in a small way, I was more into the Phantom and, more pragmatic comics and French comics and this sort of stuff. But
I'm with you. I'm with you, by the way. You're not alone on that. I was never really a Thor fan. I was like, really? Is this like the Thor from the Old Norse? Is this the Thor we're talking about? He's an Avenger? What? Never was a fan.
Yeah, I was sort of a little bit twee. I must admit, I've sort of got a bit more into it. My kids are into it. I've watched the movies now, and coming from this paleo contact headspace, I'm sort of intrigued how these writers like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, the great artist, and others, they got it from the sagas. They must have had, books of the sagas of the Norsemen, the sort of books you can get. And they went, this is really rich territory. We can make some cool stuff out of this. And the fact that they saw it, and I think I mentioned to you in another talk we had about the Stargate movie that led to the Stargate series, is this alien race called the Asgardians, and they've got a great ship class called the I think it's Mjolnir class ships that look like Thor's hammer, and they protect the people of Earth in the past and now. So other people have thought this stuff, at least in a fictional sort of way. But I think the truth's a mixture. Like, there's this incredible Norwegian lady, Maria Kvilhaug, who wrote a great big thick book I've got here, and it's chock-a-block full of little bits of paper where I've sort of put it in when I've found amazing stuff. It's called the Seeds of Yggdrasil. Seeds of Yggdrasil, Most people say it something like that. It's Yggdrasil is the way the Swedes say it. Yggdrasil, I think we say it in Icelandic. But it's the world tree. But this book is really thick. It's about 1.5 inches thick, and it's such an interesting read. And her whole thing is this shamanic, spirit journey, learning about yourself. And she's looked into the same books I've looked at, but looking for that. And she does mention aliens once or twice and sort of says, could there be something to it that's got to do with these beings we call aliens? I think there's actually a crossover. Like, my next book is going to be much more about this spiritual stuff and about being wizards and what it is to be a wizard, and about paranormal, about life after death, reincarnation, beliefs of the Viking Age, and this sort of more personal human stuff. And this first book, I've mainly stuck to these super beings, these, as you know, the Aesir, the people of Asgard, and their allies and their enemies. But I think the truth is somewhere between, and I think that even today, people sometimes are unsure whether what they're dealing with is spiritual or real. But you probably know that a lot of Christian people are really sort of freaked out by this subject, and they think it's all demons. Interesting thing is the word demon. If you don't look in a Christian dictionary, look up demon in ancient Greece, you'll find it just means powerful beings, with more power than humans. It doesn't say they're evil. It's a Greek word that just means exceptionally powerful beings, and very much like the word Elohim in the Bible, which is translated as the powerful ones by Paul Wallace in his Eden series, Moro Biglino. Very much what I found in the sagas. It's called the Rayin. When the Aesir go to council every day, they go up the tree by the Bifrost and they go to this council, and they're then called the Rayin, which is Regin. That means the ruling ones or the powerful ones. So it's the same sort of word that you come across in, the word demon, powerful ones. It's a sort of a fearful prejudice. Like, I'm not picking on Christians. I enjoyed being a Christian until I sort of started being more open-minded and starting to criticize it more. But I do really want people to be spiritual and know that there is a great God of all things, which I think is the consciousness of everything that you can call out to. Like they say, there's no atheists in foxholes. People who've been in lots of scary situations know that sometimes no one will help you except the unseen, and often you get helped in no uncertain ways, and you think, wow, it seems to be real, whatever it is. But this is the question. And I do, in the next book, I'll be talking about the All-Father. I mean, I am promoting the first book, but the second book, I could have written a book 3 times as thick as I've written. It's thick enough, but I want to get into this, the All-Father, and what this is really about, what Odin hanging on the tree and giving an eye and getting stabbed. I want to talk about that stuff as well, because I see that as the shamanic Odin,
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that too, because like I said, I have a very rudimentary understanding of some of the Norse sagas, but there's so much more that again, even somebody that's a little bit more into it than myself could learn a ton from you in different ways of looking at it. And you know what the beautiful thing about writing your first book is? You can't write 10 books until you've written the first one. So welcome to it, brother. Again, congratulations. We're talking with Dave, right? Right? Am I right? I mean, that's the whole point. So if you got more in you, man, let it flow, because there's so much wisdom within us that we don't recognize. And if we don't get it out of us, we only got a limited time here on Earth. They keep telling us, AI is going to make us immortal or whatever. I don't believe that, to be perfectly honest. I think it's nonsense, only because, well, there's always bottlenecks and the elites in charge and all the stuff, right? True post-scarcity means everybody on the planet. And I think we've seen in the Orwellian ways that those guys aren't really cared about everybody. They don't really care about everybody on the planet. Anyway, so I digress there, but you get my meaning. So keep writing, bro. Keep gushing that stuff out. We need to hear it. We need to read it. We need to recognize what we've missed regarding the old ways. Got about 30 seconds left if you want to respond to that, and we'll come back in just a second here and talk more about it.
No, that's very well put, as always, Mike. The time we're in is an exciting time to live. And when I was a young fella, surfer, I used to dream of this period, when I was an old man, when we'd have robots and artificial intelligence. I don't know if I knew about that then, probably called electronic brain or something, but I loved science fiction, and I always looked forward to the future, and I knew it would be dramatic and wonderful, and I collect old science fiction, and I see this time as just the great 70s science fiction story.
Coming to life. Glad to be here with you as part of it. Looking forward to the next book. We're still talking about this book, though. Viking Superpowers. We're here with Dave Lovegrove tonight. Please check it out. Link's going to be down in the description below. Once again, Viking Superpowers, Way of the Asgard. It's on Kindle now, paperback, and maybe hardback coming. I'm not sure about that. We'll talk to Dave when we get back. Let me know, Dave, you want to open up the phone lines, talk to some folks here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll open up the phone lines and talk to you and more with Dave when we get back. Don't go anywhere. More Troubled Minds coming up. Be right back.
Troubled mind, the words they cast, heavy shadows from the past. A restless heart, a searching soul, seeking space to become whole. Troubled minds find open sky through every tear and every sigh. We rise, we fall, wings unfurled, more than labels in this world. In crowded streets or empty rooms, our echoes chase away the gloom. A spark of hope, a whispered truth, a shared melody, our fountain of youth. We're more than static on the line, singing louder than the signs. In every chord, we claim our part, beating drums match the heart. Grab the strings, we tune the stars. Punk rock anthems heal the scars. A blended mix of rage and art, painting freedom, that's just the start. Troubled minds take the stage. In every note, we break the cage. We rise, we fall, but carry on. Sing our truth until the dawn.
Thank you.
In the quiet after the song, echoes of our rights and wrongs. But the music speaks for peace. In the chords we find release. Troubled minds now rest at ease. With every breath we seize release. We stand, we soar into the light. Our anthem roar into the night.
Indeed. What's up, guys? Hope you're well tonight. If I missed you, just say hi in the chat. Phone lines are now open if you want to pop in here. You got a question for Dave, you want to come hang out, chop it up with us a little bit, you are definitely welcome to the phone line as you know it. And of course, put your hand up in Discord. Love to hear your thoughts on this. There's a lot to it. And as usual, right, as I say, truth as a perspective is one of the most important aspects of life to me, because you can ask, if you ask the right question to 1,000 different people, you're likely to get 1,000 different answers, which is eternally fascinating. And why is that? Why is that? It's almost as if it's kind of cooked into us. And, consensus agreement is like, nah, I'm not into that. Like, let's think of this another way. And it is one of the actual, specific strengths of humans, but also is it one of our, in the end, weaknesses as well? I don't really know. I just, again, different ways to look at it. What's up, Theo? What's up, Hiker? Thanks again, Hiker, for pinning up the Dave's books over there on Rumble. Appreciate that. Do check it out, guys. If you haven't checked it out, Dave sent me an advanced copy. I read through most of it. It's very good. And let's talk about it. Love to hear your thoughts. Again, phone number coming up. I'll read that in just a second. And put your hand up on Discord if you got some comments or want to come hang out and ask Dave a couple questions. Here we go. Troubled Minds happening right now. Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, D-Live, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting, and of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight we're here with Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers. Check this out. David Lovegrove has spent decades walking the narrow ridge where orthodox archaeology ends and cosmic possibility begins. His new release, Viking Superpowers Way of Asgard, lands at the very moment governments tiptoe toward admitting that our skies have hosted uninvited guests for far longer than textbooks confess. Lovegrove retranslates the oldest Norse texts, pairs them with Bronze Age rock art, and follows a trail of anomalous artifacts that look engineered rather than merely forged. And as usual, as I say, truth is a slippery fish. The whole point of all of these conversations are to look at things with a different perspective and wonder what we've missed, because clearly consensus reality is a thing, okay? And I'm not trying to break that over my knee and throw it in the fire. It doesn't make any sense. However, asking what we've missed is not blasphemy. Indeed, it's probably the medicine we've always needed. We just didn't know we needed it. And so enter old guys like us. No offense, Dave, calling you old. I called myself old. The world needs people like us, not just Dave and I, you guys, everybody who wants to consider other ideas as part of this larger context. Because what have we missed? What are some of those family traditions that have stuck in your mind that you wonder if other people know about through intuition or through the oral tradition? There's a lot of that out there that's going to be lost in the AI age. So it's important. One of the most important things is that we talk to each other. Welcome to Troubled Minds. Welcome back, Dave. How you doing? Hope you're still feeling well. Happy afternoon in the down under. What's up, brother?
Thanks very much, Mike. It's a lovely afternoon here. It's cooling down. We've just had a typical blistering summer. And every morning I go out and bask in the gentle sun with my dog and enjoy the bees buzzing in the flowers and the butterflies and my pumpkins getting bigger. It's a good life.
As well, you should. Absolutely. All this stuff is good, but don't forget the old ways. And the old ways are, the Hobbit ways, putting your toes in the dirt and growing things and appreciating nature for what it is. Absolutely. Love to hear all that stuff. Amazing. We got a caller on the line. That's Theo. We'll talk to him in a moment here. But clearly, like I was talking during the break here, we have a big problem with people, meaning not just, let's say, a problem, it's also our gift. So which is it, I guess? I'll posit this question to everybody out there to consider. Maybe if you want to call and talk about it, that's cool. If you want to just consider it going forward. But why is it that if you ask the right question to 1,000 different people, you're likely to get 1,000 different answers? As I've always said on this show, it's one of the most fascinating things about life to me, is that really view of us not wanting orthodoxy in any way. We want to be able to add, our spice to it, our flavor, our whatever, our lore, and then be able to reinterpret it in different ways. And it's good until it's not good. And I don't know. I don't draw those lines, as some sort of arbiter of humanity or something, but I do recognize them. And I wonder if we were all sort of a consensus hive mind, if that would be better for humanity. And the contrarian in me says, no, Mike, hell no, that's ridiculous. But surely like a colony of bees or ants or something would disagree with me. There's a cohesion there, a social cohesion. I don't know. I can see it both ways. Your take on that, Dave? Welcome back. You're the best, brother.
It's good to be back, mate. Well, that's a very interesting take. The truth is, historically, fascist dictatorships are much more efficient than countries where you allow your citizens to think for themselves and do their own thing and be contrarian and hate your president or your prime minister or whatever, rather than just rounding up any dissidents and doing something horrible with them. But I think we can agree we'd rather be living in a more uncontrolled environment where we are free and where we can just talk to each other like something. Because I'm late 60s, I grew up in the 60s, and I can brag that I actually lived in the 50s. I don't remember a lot about it, but I think the thing that we've lost big time is civil discourse where people can control their emotions. And, one reason for that is there is a certain type of mindset that says being civil and whatever is some kind of male, patriarchal construct, actually, just not being obnoxious and listening to the other person politely, then having your say. And I totally disagree with that. I think intelligent people who care about the truth will always hold themselves back and not get angry, because it's childish, start yelling at people because you're angry. That's not a mature thing to do. And if you want to get to the truth, it's like when you write a letter or an email or something, or a comment on YouTube, and then you think better of it and delete it. And I've done it many times, because it's impolitic. It's not polite. It's not sensible. It's not smart. Going off at people, making them angry too, and then people are divided. We need to just be able to chill out a bit, take a chill pill and talk to each other about stuff. And usually you can find common ground if you open your mind. But there's always, human psychology is very complex, and it's all about fear and needing to feel in power and in control. But a lot of wisdom's only found when you lose control, when you let go, stop trying to be in charge, and things happen.
Indeed. We've talked about that recently as well, sort of the dark night of the soul aspect. You feel more alive than ever when you have no control over anything, but also it's a scary moment. It's something that breaks a lot of people, and they, have a really difficult time coming back from. And it's, I don't know, like I've told this tale in the past, and I won't go deep into it because this is your show and we got a caller on the line, but the whole idea of sort of losing faith in yourself is part of that process, because you got to rebuild the faith in yourself. And like I said, I'm not going to get into the tale, but I kind of feel like we've all been there once before, or maybe twice or several times, depending on, whatever deck we've been dealt, a hand we've been dealt in the deck, and however we've played our cards, for better or worse. But to recognize that we can rebuild from seemingly nothing, because of course is there really ever nothing? There's still the nature out there wanting to interact with us. But I don't know. I'm going way off the beaten path here, but we'll get back to this at some other time. And so fascinating as part of these conversations, like you said, the actual human brain and our consciousness and the human mind is, limitless. And this is why we talk about these things. Take on that, and we'll go to the call.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think we're capable of being wizards. I think we're capable of doing impossible miracles and flying and lifting rocks like Yoda and all that sort of thing. I do really believe that. It's just we have to cultivate that and have a society that accepts it and cultivates it. I was going to throw in some old surfy wisdom. Have you ever heard of Don Redondo, the Waterman?
Actually, no.
I'm sure my age here. If you're an old Californian, my age, you'd know. It was a surfing magazine. I think it was just called Surfer. It was a cartoon and a story, Don Redondo, the Waterman. It was sort of a take on Carlos Castaneda and the teachings of Don Juan, but it was a surfy version. So this guy always had all this wisdom about life based on surfing. Surfing did teach me a lot. And one of the things I learned in surfing was that when you go over the falls big time on big waves and you getting held down, and you start to think you're going to drown, and it's tremendous force a big wave puts on you, and you learn to not panic. You basically learn that there is no way you can do anything, like you are powerless against tons of water from 8 to 10 foot waves. Say even a 6 footer can hold you down heavily, and the secret is don't freak out. Just relax. And I remember doing that, lying on the bottom of the sea, pretty much just getting squashed like a bug by an elephant and just waiting. You just wait and you blank your mind, because if you panic, you suck in water and you drown. And surfing taught me a lot of stuff like that about my own fear levels, how to deal with fear, how if I push through my fear, I would change into a different guy, and I'd go from being a terrified landlubber into a dude that had like seaweed for hair. You're just changing a whole different creature if you had the courage to push through your fear, and then suddenly the fear was gone and you're filled with this great buzz of self-confidence and power. And, all of life can be like that.
Well
That's
said.
my Don Redondo thing to say.
Well said. I love it. Absolutely love it. We're here with David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers. Again, he just released his book. It is called Viking Superpowers: Way of Asgard. Please check it out. Links in the description down below. Kindle is out now. It's $11.99 in Australia. It's $9.99 in the United States. Just to differentiate, there's two different links down there. So depending on where you're at, if you want to check it out, please do. But do recognize there's two different links and two different continents going on. So please help our friends. If you want to be part of the conversation tonight, we are taking your phone calls now. The phone line is open. What do you guys know about this? How come there's so many different ways to look at all this? And how come we're telling the same tale over and over and over again regarding not just Asgard and all the rest of this, but as I said, Minerva and Athena and the owl and all of these things that kind of fit into the modern way of redefining the old tales? Why is that? And do you think that Dave here and me and everybody else that's part of these conversations, you think we're onto something? 702-957-1037. Click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. We'll put you on the show. Just like this, let's go to Theo in Philly. What's up, brother? Well, thanks for being patient. How you doing tonight? Go right ahead, sir.
Oh, man. What's up? What is happening? How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Can you hear him, Dave?
Yep. Loud and clear.
Right on. Loud and clear. Welcome, Theo. What's on your mind, my man?
No, great to hear you guys. Yeah, I just think that this is a very interesting conversation, and I don't have too much to say other than I do like what David Lovegrove has to say. What do you think? Is there anything that kind of leads you towards Australian poetry? I know that you're mostly into just kind of the Nordic type of stuff, but are there any examples of Australian poetry that you like or find interesting? And I know that's kind of an off-base question, but I'm just very curious.
Oh, that's a nice question. We've got a couple of very famous old-time poets, a guy called Banjo Patterson and a guy called Henry Lawson.
Banjo Patterson?
Yeah, Banjo Patterson and Henry Lawson. They called them bush poets. So they were writing back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, but they're still beloved because it's a sort of like the Wild West, Australia. It's the old days when there was, bullock trains and stagecoaches and pretty much cowboys and Indians sort of stuff, except it was, cowboys and Aboriginals. It was just as tragic, but they were sort of after that, the bad period, but they're just talking about our country and how much they loved it and all sorts of characters. And have you heard of The Man from Snowy River? It was a film.
No, The Man from Snowy River?
Yeah, it's a film, if you want to watch that, but it's a famous poem. I'll get in trouble here, but I think it was written by Banjo Patterson, but it might have been Henry Lawson. Of course, we have lots of poets like all countries do, literate people who write cool stuff. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head more modern than them, but that's a good place for you to start if you want to just get a taste of what we consider our Wild West, our sort of tradition of Australian country life.
No, I love that. Because it does feel like there's a lot of different sort of connectivity between where the British, Scottish, English all ended up colonizing, where there's just so much really interesting history behind there that I don't know, where it's I got no idea what your accent is exactly. But it's really very similar to my Kentucky grandmother. she just like has this like accent that is just so similar to like, you know, almost being Scottish, but almost being Australian, but almost being Canadian. I don't know. It's just all weird history, but yeah.
Well, that's a very succinct observation because we're very British, very Scots, English, Welsh, and Irish. So our accent's a mixture. It's mostly based on a Southern English accent, but bringing this back to the Vikings, etc., most of Northern England and Scotland and Ireland was sort of ruled and settled by people from Scandinavia during the Viking Age. And in studying Icelandic language, what really shocks me sometimes is, as I've got a lot better with the language, I come across these sort of ways of saying things, and I think, wow, that's how the old timers used to speak. You know, it's where my grandmother, who lived to 109, she used to say things like that, but you don't hear anybody speak like that anymore. And there's a lot of poetic, if you get into English poetry, you go back a ways, you get into like just words my kids never understand, and even 50-year-olds, I say things sometimes and they say, what does that mean? Sorry, that's a bit of an old literary way of speaking, but it goes back almost always to the Norse. You know, it's quite astounding, to tell the truth. And we sort of grew up in a Norse way.
It's like my ancient grandmother, who was from like Appalachia, Kentucky. You know, just from like just the boons of Appalachia, Kentucky. She would always say that there was a skiff of snow, and just always kind of sounded like a skiff was just a made-up sort of Appalachian, Kentucky word. But my mom actually like took her to go to Scotland right before she died, and skiff is apparently like a common Scottish word for a very light dusting of snow.
It's interesting. If you think of most words with K in them, like skip or skirt, they're two classic ones. If you change the K to a H, you end up with ship and shirt, and that's a typical. It's a Norse to English thing where they're Norse words, but they change. If you've ever been to Holland, the main airport is called Schiphol, which literally means ship hole or ship harbour. And skirt, we think of that as a woman's clothes. Yeah, it's a Norse thing, and the women wear skirts, but the Vikings wore skirts. But it meant the whole shirt, like a long shirt, and there's many instances of that, and that's the thing about, like, for me, studying Icelandic has greatly enriched my understanding of my own native language, and also I'm a bit of an underdog person. I always stick up for the underdog, and I got into Icelandic because there's only like 350,000 people, and the language is a little bit endangered. And even back in the 70s, I just thought, well, I'm gonna learn this, not some real common one. I'm gonna stick up for these guys.
And we're glad you did.
Do you have a question about? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Awesome.
Yeah. Do you have a question about the? The Viking?
Yeah, any question about the Viking stuff there?
No. No, I just wanted to say that, I had two grandmothers, like my one grandmother who was Scottish from Kentucky, or predominantly like Scottish, maybe a little bit of German from Kentucky. And then I, had my other grandmother who was kind of from the Northeast and a little bit more German and Scottish, but much more well-educated. Like, that grandmother was one of the first people, as far as I understand it, to graduate as a woman with a degree in biology. But then, like, her opinion.
Those old timers.
Why? Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, the people of the Appalachians, from what I understand, what people often call hillbillies, great proportion came from Scotland and Ireland, and they did preserve a lot of the old culture that got lost in other places, including in Scotland and Ireland. So, yeah, that's pretty groovy stuff.
Fantastic, Theo.
I know, but like it was like always. Oh, sorry.
You're good. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Oh no, it was always like kind of like really funny. Like my very educated grandmother, who kind of like knew everything and smoked a lot of cigarettes and had a lot of theories about everything. She would always tell us that our family, we always liked water a lot. Like, we always liked sailing and canoeing and everything. And her entire theory about that was just, back when everyone else was in Scotland, we got raped by a bunch of Vikings, and that's why we all like water.
Come on. Stop.
Damn, Granny.
She was pulling your leg. Sounds
kind of plausible, but yeah, like that was her actual theory about it. Was just back in the day we.
I know about the raping bit, but I certainly think
all that type of stuff happened.
Definitely.
And that's why we all subsequently, as a family, love water.
Yeah, it's a Scandinavian thing, and definitely, the Scandinavians are all through Britain, and I often sitting out my surfboard as a young guy, I used to think, this is Viking heaven. I always felt like a Viking sort of guy. And I think if I was a Viking, I'd be stoked to live here, this warm, happy place out in the sea. And I remember being in a bit of a storm on a big ship, and everyone else was seasick, and I just thought, this is normal to me, and I just imagined the ship was like a massive surfboard, and I didn't get the slightest seasickness. I was just sitting out on the board.
It kind of feels right, though, doesn't it? Yeah, it just kind of feels like you're supposed to be there.
Yeah.
You're the best. We're running out of time. Final thought, my man.
No final thoughts. Thanks for having me. Definitely appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you. Viking Superpower and Mike, you guys are both the best. I will talk to you guys later.
As are you. Thanks for the call.
Good on you, mate.
Theo in Philly. You know him, you love him, the official poet of Troubled Minds. Thanks for listening. Thanks for calling. And thanks for caring about these conversations. And look, as usual, there's so many ways to look at all this stuff. And the dialects and the oral tradition, all of that stuff is incredibly important, and it's being lost. It's being lost as we get all the old timers kind of kick off this mortal coil. And I say that in the nicest way. And then what are we left with? We're left with sort of new interpretations of everything, which isn't necessarily the best, which is really why I've been doing this for as long as I have, because I think it's important for us to recognize what we're missing. And there's a lot we're missing. Appreciate the call, Theo. Dave, anything on that? We got about a couple minutes left before we take a break here, but there's a lot in your book that I want to get back to, but anything you want to add to what Theo said, or what else you got to lead us into another moment after the break? You tell me.
Well, I'll tell you a few cool Scottish crossed with Vikings stories. There was a group of warriors who were feared by the Vikings called the Galloglaws, and Galloglaw means inhabitants of Galloway who are lads. Glah sort of means lads, apparently. But that's where my people are from Galloway in southern Scotland and Galloway in Northern Ireland. And they were half Norse, half Gael. The Gaelic people of Scotland have been there since the Ice Age and probably before that. They are the native peoples. And, including the Picts. It's sort of, a certain type of stock. And then you've got the real Scandinavian types who came down from Norway, Denmark, and, from Iceland, from the Faroe Islands. But, with dogs, you get a mixed breed, and sometimes it makes a special sort of dog. And it's not really considered polite to talk about humans like this, but it is true that, certain breeds of humans have certain gifts, intellectually, physically, whatever. It's not hard to go and check that out. And when these Galaglas were, I don't fully believe that the Vikings were always just raping everyone. I think there was a heck of a lot of actual marriages going on to keep the peace and just love affairs because people were beautiful and young and were taken with each other. But these mixtures, like does happen. They get rejected for being half and half, but they end up being these astounding mercenaries who everyone was scared of.
Which we'll get back to in just a second here. We're here with, appreciate you, Dave. David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers. He just released a book, again, called Viking Superpowers, Way of Asgard. Check it out. Links in the description. Be right back. We got more coming up with David. We got more coming up. Matt Sal on the line and your calls as well if you want to be part of the conversation. 702-957-1037. Be right back. More Troubled Minds on the way.
Crazy colors swirling, got the laughter in the air. Jesters in the night, they weave magic everywhere. Clowns are juggling dreams, wild world is in despair. Nothing's quite as certain when reality's a game. Chaos in the corner, whispers calling out your name. Look around, it's laughter, even when we're feeling pain. You know they want me, there'd be nights like this. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Strange nights I insist, strange nights I insist. Dancing shadows flicker under neon all aglow, while the stage is set for tales that nobody will know. Echoes of the laughter as the lost ones see the show. Life's a playful circus where the chaos takes a bow. Joy and sorrow blending in the rhythm that we vow. Join the ride of madness, it's the only way for love. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Strange nights I insist, strange nights I insist. Twists and turns and shadows, laughter in the night. A tapestry of madness, dancing with the light. Fools and fun were woven, chaos in our stride. Embrace the wild, let the laughter be our guide. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Strange nights I insist, strange nights I insist. Falling in the rhythms, beats that pound and thrum. A flashing carnival where the misfits come undone. Whirling through the madness with our hearts set to ignite. In the symphony of chaos will remain the shining light. Yeah, nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this. Nobody warned me, there'd be nights like this.
Indeed. Strange nights, I insist. What's up, guys? Hope you're well tonight. APOT Gaston. What's up, Jeff and Wisco? I see you. Eric. What's up, buddy? Sweets. We got Herschel. Matt Sal coming up. Thanks for the hand up there. We got Daryl James. What's up, Ricky? Dawn at Quantum. We got Roving Fungus. Told you I'd remember. What's up, guys? Hope you're well tonight. Theo, fantastic call. Thank you. Ephemerance. I see you. Cubs Future. Welcome to the thing. How you doing? Good evening. Welcome back, guys. Yeah, I took some time off. Lots happening. Lots happening in the world. I don't know how I do it all, but sometimes you got to just do it all, don't you? But who else? Hiker. Thanks to Hiker for pinning the all the amazing stuff from all the people saying the things, and also showing us links of David Lovegrove's Viking Superpowers book. So thank you for all that. Please check it out. That's the whole point of this, is to share ideas and really sort of synthesize where we came from and tell the story of not just who we are, but what we've learned throughout our lives. That's the whole point of all of this. And, being nice to each other. Don't forget that part. I see you guys. If I missed you, just say hi. I'll say hi back. What's up, Stephen England? Roving Fungus. What's up, Dawn? Dawn says this: my English grandmother also said skiff of snow also. Personally, I've never heard that, but, I'm a weirdo. Yeah. Stephen England, how you doing? Good evening. What's up, Andy? Good night. Rayelvin, how you doing? I see you guys. Thanks again for all the kind comments and being nice to each other. And I think I know what Matt Zell's going to ask, so I'm not going to, or what he's going to talk about, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. It's in the chat, part of it, regarding Odin. So we'll talk about that probably a little bit here when we're coming up. And we're taking your calls. If you want to be part of the conversation, put your hand up. Talking to Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers and his first book. You can't write 10 books until you've written the first one, right? And that's what this is all about. Here we go. Troubled Minds coming up in about 15 seconds, and love to hear your thoughts on this. There's so much more from his book that we'll get into, but the whole point of this is talking to each other. So if you guys have some ideas or some questions for Dave, love to hear it. Here we go. Troubled Minds happening in about 5 seconds. So let's do it, shall we? Here we go. Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, D Live, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting, and of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight we're here with Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, who just released his new book called Viking Superpowers Way of Asgard. And as I've been saying, you can't write 10 books and be the old guy that wrote 10 books or 20 books until you get the first one out of the way. So congratulations to Dave for getting the first one out of the way. And I like where his mind is and where he's heading with this, because not just, let's say, looking at the old Neolithic space of where we came from, but also how this fits into the larger aspect of consciousness in that conversation. When you look at the old ways, the old sagas, and once again, very much like we talk about often on the show, Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, sort of these circular moments in history that repeat themselves over and over and over again and have echoes and mirrors of each other all the way throughout history, pretty much no matter where you are in the world. It's an incredible thing to consider that all these humans, all the disagreeable humans, as we were saying earlier, right? We're always sort of contrarians in some capacity, but we still have ways to tell a very similar way to tell very similar stories. It's a wild concept, and I think probably there's more to this than we give it credit for as a population, as a modern society. Dave Lovegrove, welcome back, brother. Hope you're doing fine and having a good time as I am. And how you feeling? What's your thought there? And we'll get to Matt Zell on the call here.
I can just say I'm feeling fantastic, Mike. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I love your show, and I love the people that get on. I love their names, all the monikers. I love Roving Fungus. That's a nice one.
That's a nice one. Sure is.
I've had Roving Fungus a few times in my life. Where I used to work on an apple orchard, and I got this terrible thing in my, between my legs. I could hardly walk. And it turned out it was very common for apple pickers to get this. It's like a fungus that lives in trees. And, it's just one of the thrills of life, getting things like that.
I didn't know that. That's wild. Wait, so what happens? So is it, how do you got to dip your feet in bleach or something? How do you get rid of it? How do you get rid of it?
No, you just, antifungal creams, the way of it.
Okay.
When you're working out, it was very hot here, so when you're sweating and whatever, just the trees always brushing against you, and I don't know how they get into you, but they rove, the fungus roves and decides where it wants to go. I also love the name Misfit.
That's Misfit. That's Daryl in New York. Yeah, we got a lot of amazing friends that have literally been friends for a long time. You shouted out Lily earlier from Australia. She's been a friend for years and years and years of mine, and a friend of the show. It's great to not just sort of build, an identity, a brand, a batch of ideas together, but also to make such amazing friends all over the world, which again, you, and all credit to Dave, by the way, because we never would have met if he didn't reach out to me. Not because I shouldn't have found him, but because I'm up to my neck in stuff. And so I should be, out there listening to the things that people, new theories and new ideas and new books. I just can't. And so he reached out and was like, hey, Nick from, UFO Chronicles said, hey, you should probably go check out Troubled Minds. And he did. He sent me an email, and we were fast friends forever now. It's you can't get rid of me, Dave. Sorry. Nice try. But that's the whole point of just meeting amazing people all over the world and talking about amazing ideas. Back to your book just for a second here regarding, the Real Gods Please Stand Up is where we left off regarding sort of the kind of combing through your book. There's another 7 chapters after this. So we're not really, no spoiler alerts here entirely, but just sort of the loose concept of the idea framework. But it gets weird because now we get into the more sort of ancient astronaut theory and some of your actual work you've done in spotting not just patterns, as I've described, but maybe anomalous artifacts that are worthy of discussion. You want to share some of that and tease some of that to why people should buy the book and talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get to you. Hang tight, Matt Sal. We'll get to you in just a second here. So I want to give Dave a moment to talk about that particular thing because it is a central aspect to his book.
Absolutely. Well, when I was in Scandinavia, the first place I landed in Copenhagen, so first place I went was a long-term dream, going to the Roskilde Viking Museum, where they've got a number of ships that they reclaimed from the sea, and also where they make ships, a big workshop, and that was just like being a kid in Disneyland for me. And then the next day I just jumped on a train, went straight across to Sweden, and pretty much straight across from where the train goes over this bridge. Only a little further north is a major city called Lund, L-U-N-D. And there's the University of Lund has a museum, and in that museum is this brooch, and it's called the Voland, the elf brooch, or Volden brooch. It's V-O with 2 dots above it, L-U-N-D. And I had sort of, I don't remember exactly which came first, but just by that incredible sort of luck, I saw this brooch and went, holy hell, what's that? And I think I saw it as, I saw there was all these replicas of this brooch that on the, Vikings were in, and people were selling this brooch on different sites. Some were calling it a Loki brooch and some were calling it a Volan brooch, but they both were referring to stories of flying. And then I then found the real thing, and as I looked at it, I thought, how can this be real? This thing really looks like a guy in a jet suit wearing this insanely modern and technologically smart suit with like rings, like a ring suit to take pressure, and heavy gloves and heavy boots and a big helmet, which looks like it's got goggles on, and he's got these eagle wings, but there's lines across at about 2/3 of the way down the wing. There's lines that must indicate ailerons, the surfaces to turn an aircraft. One comes up, one goes down and turns, and there's a big tail, bird-type tail, which is called an elevator on an aircraft. And then underneath where the figure's backside is, there's these 2 shapes that are sort of, they're not square, but they're sort of like squarish, but they're bent, and they've got these little knobs on that suggest to me something like attitude controllers. And underneath, there's these 2 things. And as an artist, I've got as good an eye as anybody's ever had. We trained for years and years just all day looking at things, drawing things, and you really can read visual stuff to a high level. And as soon as I saw these 2 shapes, I knew they were flames. And that's what I thought, that is so anachronistic. Why would there be flames on this flying man? So that was the holy grail of the trip. The start of the trip was to go and see this brooch. And of course it was quite little, and it was in this massive case, so I couldn't get super close to it. But I got lots of really good photos from different angles. And when during that time and later, I really studied there's 2 stories. There's one called Voland the Kvidia, which is in the that poetic Edda, the one I said that Snorri didn't write, but he drew from the same sources, talking about this elf who was a master craftsman, and all this stuff happened to him. And this cruel king had his hamstrings cut, and then he escapes in a flying machine that he makes. Now, in this Voland the Kvidia, it doesn't outright say it's a machine. It just says that he took to the sky, laughing. He rose up into the sky, and then he flies over to where the king is, and he's sort of mocking him from up near the clouds. And then first he's landing on the king's castle wall, and he's talking to him, and he reveals that he's killed this king's sons and made love to his daughter, and she's pregnant, and so the king's not happy, and he just takes off. So that was incredible to me. And then the fact that this is a story that probably goes way, way back, not 1,000 years, but this brooch is from 1000 AD, so like near the end of the Viking Age, and it's found next to a temple. And I realized, like, this is a sacred object. Okay, this is very meaningful to these people, but why? Why is this story so meaningful? And then I found another saga, which was written in northern Germany, but it's also in Norse. And it literally, it's hard to fathom how this could be anything but what it sounds like. It tells the same story, but in much greater detail. And it literally says he builds a flying device that he climbs into, and then he gets his brother to test it out. And his brother goes up and comes down really fast, and he almost loses consciousness. The Norse literally says he almost loses consciousness. The wind was roaring past, and then he crashed down. And the elf says to his brother, I tricked you. I told you to take off into the wind, but I told you to land with the wind, but that's actually wrong. You should always take off into the wind and land into the wind, because he thought his brother was going to steal the machine. Right? So that is a bit of realism. And it's like, how would they know? Like, sure, okay, they probably watch birds, how they land, but that's such a modern bit of aviation knowledge, take off and land into the wind. But this fact that he almost loses consciousness, he's going so fast, it really just sounds like he goes into a spin. He's pulling really high G's. He starts to black out. He pulls it out somehow and doesn't get killed. And then the elf says, well, I'll have to go back to the drawing board and you know, I'll build on this. I'll make it better. Later in that particular saga, it talks about how he goes on a journey for 18 days in this giant log, which he carves. He carves sections in there so he can live in the log, and he's got food supplies and water. And then it says he sets a glass window into the opening of the log, right? And he takes off. And so 18 days later, this king's men find this log, but they don't really recognize it. These guys know all about trees and logs. They're sort of going, this is wondrously carved. What sort of tree is this? It's really big. And then the hatch opens, the glass hatch opens, and he pops out and says, I'm a man in here. Don't kill me. Don't set it on fire.
I'm just a person flying this magical machine. Yeah. Don't worry about me. Yep. I mean, do worry about me.
So you've got this really detailed description of a flying machine backed up by this brooch. And then you've got another story about him making essentially a submarine. It's got to be a submarine, because why would you put a glass thing on it if you were just going to float on top? And everyone knew what a boat looks like. So I reckon these guys, it's sort of come up out of the water, and these royal retainers are just freaked out and go, what is this? And, so you've got those two things. Now, when I looked at this brooch it was found in a place called Urbakra, but it was taken to the big museum in Lund for the security. But my theory, right, and you'll like this, Mike, and our friends listening, I reckon that 1,000 years ago, these brooches were sort of like a souvenir of the temple that you could buy, and they are made, they think they're made for like the end of belts, like, sort of a little attachment on the end of a belt that looks really cool. This little flying guy in his suit. I reckon they had the original flying machine in the temple. And I reckon that the priest used to start her up every couple of years. They had just enough fuel, and start it up and show the jet motors, and everyone was just going, whoa, that's the gods for sure. But
exactly.
I'm utterly convinced that these things are flames on the back of the brooch, and I really can't think of a better way to do it. I mean, it's just flames, like a motor will flame when it's just sitting there idling. They knew flames and they knew how to model flames. And I, as an artist, I look at it thinking as a sculptor, I can't think of a better way to make flames. People have said to me, "Oh, but they're probably it's on the cover of the book. Anyone has looked up the book, you'll see this flying brooch on the cover." Yeah, and I reckon that when the place was Christianized, this stuff was either destroyed as the work of the devil, for sure, because it must have been the work of the devil, surely, or it got carted off to the Vatican and it's down there deep underground in the catacombs.
Yeah, with the coronavisor or whatever, right? Ancient astronaut theorists definitely say yes. And who knows?
They definitely say yes.
They definitely say yes, exactly. And as usual, look, you guys decide on this. This is the whole point of sort of looking at this in different ways. And are there legs here? I mean, I kind of agree with them that it seems like there is feathers maybe, but also look like it's some sort of a combustion engine or something to that degree that leaves some sort of dust or residue that kind of comes out the backside of that craft, whatever this is. And there's clearly a person in it. You can see the arms and the legs kind of in there flying this machine, very Daedalus and Icarus and flying too close to the sun sort of situation, back to the Greek and Romans. But yeah, wild stuff. Hang tight, Dave, with that thought. Amazing stuff. Again, talking with David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, talking about his new book called Way of Asgard. Please check it out. Again, links are in the description down below. Thanks for being patient, my man. Let's go to Matt in California. Matt Sal, what's up? Back to the true names. Matthew, you are on Troubled Minds with Michael and David. How are you, sir? Happy Sunday. Welcome back to Troubled Minds, and go right ahead.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Yeah, loud and clear. How you doing, my man?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the guest. He's very informative. I've been learning a lot on all the shows he's on. And I want to say thank you to him for his time and his knowledge, and congratulations on the book.
Well, thanks very much, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I called talking about like the Vikings and the gods, the Norse gods, because I really like those stories. But recently I watched a show that kind of blew my mind. And the show is called Twilight of the Gods. It's an anime on Netflix. And it's Zack Snyder's version of Ragnarok, which Zack Snyder's not the best writer, but it's a different story. Okay. It's not canon. It's just a different version of the story.
Yeah. And
something that, first it's a really violent anime. Of course, gods and Vikings fighting. It's a lot of violence. But some of the storyline that really got me, the first part was the way they did Odin. They made him seem like he was like he could like transform between three people. So he could be the Allfather, which is, he's a guy with gray hair and he's got the patch over his eye. He could be Odin, which it shows him in like his battle armor with his like helmet with the feathers. And also he could be the Hanged Man, which is like, it's him naked and he's got a rope around his neck, symbolizing that he was like, he was like three different versions of this god, and all the crazy stuff he did in the stories of, how he got that power, his sacrifice for the power and all that. But one of the crazy parts of the story, and little spoiler alert, is so Odin has the two crows, right? Hunin and Munin. Not saying that right, but Hunin and Munin. He has the two crows, and that's thought and memory. So he could see, he's the Allfather, all-knowing. But the one thing that Odin doesn't have is the power of foresight. He cannot predict or see the future. Like, he needs oracles. And we talked about oracles of Delphi, and different kinds of oracles in these stories that predict the future. And the part of the story, Ragnarok's already started. And we all know Ragnarok is, that's the end. That's, everybody dies except for like two people. even the gods.
Spoiler
And
alert.
spoiler alert. But he knows, they know that everybody dies, but he wants to know how. He wants to know, he wants to know what happens, how. He wants to know the future. And so he finds this this oracle, tells, makes her to give him the future. She said, okay, I'll give you this vision of the future. And this part, like the show kind of blew my mind, where she shows him a vision of the future. And all of a sudden, Jesus shows up. Like out of nowhere, out of pocket. Like, what? What's Jesus doing in the story? And it shows Odin, it shows him the future where, like nowadays, where there's houses, buildings and churches, and everybody's worshiping Jesus, and nobody knows who Odin is, and how the gods have been forgotten. And it made me really, got me kind of deep, because it's like, did the gods forsaken us, or did we forsaken them by forgetting about them? I just thought it was a really good story, part of the storyline.
Yeah, that's hot. Like that was one of that's one of the most interesting related stories I've heard. Well done. There's a lot of things I could say about what you said. I haven't seen that Twilight of the Gods. I like anime and manga. I actually speak Japanese a little bit, and what I would say, this is just Dave's take on it, but taking nothing from this great story, as you just told me, but Odin and his wife had what was called spådom, which means foresight, the ability to see the future. It's actually one of the first stories told about him in Snorri's Edda. It says him and his wife had spådom, this gift of prophecy or seeing, and they realised they were going to be really famous and successful in the north, and that's why they uprooted and got all their people, and I think they flew up from the area of Turkey, Anatolia, where Asgard originally was, what they called Old Asgard, round about the area of Troy. And they flew up into the north, and it literally tells you, first he goes to Russia, and some of his sons marry women there, and then they go to France and marry people there, and then they go to Saxony, and then Denmark, and then Sweden, and then Norway. And so that's a big part of the powers of these people, is that they've got these abilities, which a lot of people, including myself, believe humans do have, the ability of clairvoyance and future sight and, telepathy and prophecy type of things. I'm trying to remember all the things you said. There was, it's really interesting that you brought up the three personalities of Odin, because a big part of the stories is that he's got these two brothers. There's Odin, then his brother's called Vili, V-I-L-I, and then Vjay, which is V and an E with a sort of an accent on the top. In Icelandic we say Yay, so it's Vjay. And these brothers rule Asgard when he's away. It says Odin often went away on very long journeys. I suspect he was not only travelling around the Earth, but he was going out into space, going to other worlds. But there's this really telling story where he goes away for so long that everyone thinks he must be dead. So his two brothers take all his gear and they share his wife. And when I first read it, I thought, maybe these guys are clones, maybe Odin and his two brothers are identical. And when the Wizard King Gylfi gets to Asgard and he gets sort of abducted and he's brought before these three characters called High, Justice High, and Third, and they're basically Odin, like they're the three brothers, and their name High, Justice High, and Third is like, it's sort of indicating it's the same level, but I do think it's hinting at or telling us that Odin was cloned, or identical triplets. And it's a funny one because there's not much else about these two brothers except for the more mythical thing about how they created humans and they helped create the world, and create Midgard. So there's some sort of crossover, probably with much more ancient tales that people believed in, and they believed different things in different parts of Scandinavia. They didn't all believe in Odin and Thor, and Freya and Loki. It seems that these stories are brought together, and that's, I think, my take is that these very high-tech people did that. Anyway, I'm going to check out that anime. Thanks for bringing it up, mate.
Oh yeah, Matt, if you got more, you're welcome to stay past the break. You tell me, brother.
No, thank you guys. Thanks for your time. Have a good night.
You're the best. Appreciate you. Be right back. More Troubled Minds coming up. That's Matt's Owl, Temple of the Owl is the name of his podcast. More with Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, taking your calls as well when we return. Don't go anywhere. More Troubled Minds on the way. Be right back.
In shadows, we've got maps where nobody goes. In the night under hidden glows, guardians of what no one knows. We seek the truth, nothing can hide from me. In cloaked silence we traverse the lines, through ancient scrolls in forgotten times. Voices echo in the halls of lore, guardians of the mysteries evermore. We seek the truth, nothing can hide from me. Shadows meet in cryptic disguise, our eyes sharp against the everlines. With silver threads we weave the stealth to guard the past, forgotten world. Signals bouncing off the astral plane, invisible codes that can't be tamed. We decode the stars under the midnight veil, base state and silken sweat midnight hail. In the echoes of time where the legends lay, we tread the path where shadows play. With spectral eyes we discern the truth, unraveling tales from ancient.
Ah, yes. With spectral eyes, we discern the truth. What's up, guys? Hope you're well tonight. If I missed anybody, sorry about that. Trying to keep up and just tell everybody hello. Thanks for spending your time and energy with us. Thanks for, again, allowing me some time off to do some other things. I got some things cooking, as always, right? If you're doing it right, you always got some things cooking, and I've got some things cooking. Glad to be back, and glad to have Dave, an old friend here, talking about amazing ideas. We're going to get back to him in just a second. We're taking your calls if you got a question for him or some ideas here. And the whole point of this, as I've always said, is to share ideas. And again, sort of decouple from, one foot in the real world, one foot in the ether, and then talk about what this looks like. That's the entire point of all these discussions. If I missed you, sorry about that. What's up? Enoch is here. Austin, what's up? Sweets. Apot, Gaston, who'd I miss? What's up? Ricky James, Don, Quantum, Roving Fungus, Hirsch. What's up, guys? If I missed anybody, say hi as we go, and I'll try and catch up at Cubs Future. I see you there, buddy. What's going on? What's going on? Here we go. Troubled Minds coming up. One more segment with Dave of Viking Superpowers. Please take a moment to go buy his book. It's on Kindle and paperback, and more coming soon. Here we go. Troubled Minds happening. Meow. Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, D Live, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting, which you can find, by the way, at just a regular website, troubledminds.org. On the very top, there's a radio button. Click that. It's playing 24 hours a day of all kinds of amazing stuff, old Troubled Mind shows. James is on there of Salcedo Paranormal, and Ricky and all kinds of other friends. And that's the point. Hey, let's create things together. Let's grow together, and let's let's create a future where we don't have to wonder what comes next because we're manifesting it together. Love to hear your thoughts on this tonight as we're talking about not just, let's say, the Viking superpowers aspect of it, the ancient astronaut theory, consciousness as primary, and Matzel, again, shout out Matzel there. He's also on the network with us as well, Temple of the Owls' podcast. He brought up a very fascinating part of Odin, the Allfather, sort of the idea of a trinity in the same aspect of the god himself. And Dave alluded to that a little bit earlier, talking about, will the real gods please stand up, in his book, talking about Odin. Is he, the old dying man saying, stick me with a spear so I can go to Valhalla? Or is he the same sort of supernatural, immortal god that finds the runes hanging on the tree? What is it? The tree? What's it called? Yggdrasil is what it's called, but what's not the tree of life? What's it called? What's up, Dave? Welcome back. Please correct me.
The world tree.
The word. That's it. The world tree. That's exactly what I was looking for. Anyway, my point is that it's fascinating that not only do we have, we talked about Amun-Ra and some of these other Egyptian ideas of merging deities together into a particular super god or super aspect. Do you think that's is really what's happening here with Odin, the Allfather, and then Odin, the sort of doddering old man, this guy, dying of some sickness and needs to get stuck by a spear to go to have the Valkyries take him to Valhalla? Like, what's your take on the Trinity aspect of Odin there?
Well, that's actually from my next book as well. I feel a bit silly I'm promoting the next book as much as the first one, but I've got this rabbit hole I've been going down to do with the Magi. And even though, the Magi who visited baby Jesus, I do think Jesus was a very important person. And there's something going on there. I'm tracking down this mystery, but the Magi were an ancient sect, and I read an article by there's a group in the Masonic Lodge who are the Magician's Lodge. So you've got to be a practicing registered magician to join that lodge. But they sort of trace their lineage back, 8,000-9,000 years, according to this guy. And they're talking about the sort of powers and abilities they had in the ancient days, which really does sound like ancient astronaut type stuff, as well as incredible paranormal abilities, telepathy and telekinesis and making things appear and all this sort of stuff. So when you come to the biblical Magi, it says they came from the east. There is a connection with them and the Chaldeans. And the Chaldea is in this area where Snorri says the Viking gods lived, up in it's where the Sumerians originally came from, in this area of Anatolia, Turkey. And I think that there's a chance that these Magi who follow this star, it's got to be a ship. it goes ahead of them, whether they were actually in it or whether they were sort of land-based but just star directed them and then hovered over the places where the baby had been born and shone a big light down and showed them where to go. It's quite a fascinating story. These three magi, there's a lot of legends around them, but they definitely were three magic guys. And the earliest representation I've found of them was from like 100 years after Jesus. So it's only like 100 AD. And the three of them look sort of European. They look northern. There's not a sort of an African guy and a Egyptian guy and somebody else. The way they represented them was more European looking, but I wonder who they were, and I wonder if they were the three brothers, Odin,
yes.
Billy, and Bay.
I love it. As part of it. And so, as you said earlier with the clones and whatnot, I wonder if sort of the one entity manifesting as three, which is again not just a biblical thing. It's not just an all father thing here. This is something that crops up time and again throughout history. 3 being a sacred number and all kinds of stuff. I'm not sure if you're into numerology at all, but it does make my tinfoil tingle, as I like to say, because a lot of these stories seem to be, again, reciprocal to each other. They seem to be, calls and answers to particular aspects of humanity. And in that capacity here, when we're talking about the Norse and the rest of it, it's no different. There's so many aspects of this you can kind of track down and face these stories and ideas together and mirror image them even. It's a pretty wild thing to consider. And I guess in the end, which is what I'm always talking about, trying to consider what this means in the larger context of being human. Why is that? And what does it mean? Really becomes my question. You don't have to answer that because I think it's probably cosmic in some capacity, and I'm not sure there is an answer. It's the Allfather's runes. Okay. It is the cheat code to our reality. But to get it, you have to be immortal and then sort of sacrifice yourself, again, conceptually, to attain that knowledge, that wisdom, that Promethean fire to bring from the ether into our realm. Just, again, me riffing a little bit on some ideas, but I don't know. Your take on that or anything else? As you know, we're nonlinear, open-ended, and anything that came to your mind right there. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, funny enough, I was researching this and I came across a Christian pastor in the States who wrote, have you heard of the prosperity doctrine?
Nope, you got me again. I don't know what that is.
It's a Christian thing. It's a prosperity doctrine. It's a mainly a US-based take on Christianity, which, like, traditionally Protestant Christians always had a thing about being sort of like Jesus, like being poor. It's somehow more holy to be poor than rich. And you got those Bible verses, it's easier for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven than a camel to go through. Well, it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than a camel to go through the eye of a needle. So there's this head trip about money is sort of evil. But there's a strong doctrine that's been going since the 70s called the prosperity doctrine, where preachers in the States have preached that God wants us to be wealthy and to have lots of money, and if we're people of God and we're doing the right thing by God, he doesn't want us to be poor. So I found this article by a preacher who preaches that sort of stuff, but it was really cool what he said. He basically said, I've calculated what the gold, frankincense and myrrh that the three kings, or some of them say there wasn't just three, there could have been more, but I'll stick with three. They brought to little Jesus and Mary and Joseph and all the cows and everything watching. This stuff's worth like quite a few millions, right? And then just after, they go back to Herod the king, and he goes, "Oh, cool, dude, you found him. Yeah, well, can you take me to him?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, king. Can we get back to you tomorrow? We've got something on tonight." And he's like, "Yeah, cool." And so the Magi go away and just bail. you know, because they know this king's a baddie and he's going to go and kill the little baby Jesus.
He's going to get him. Yeah, exactly. Such a trap.
Yeah,
like, hey, that's super cool. Could you show me where this kid is? Come on now.
Yeah, right, man. Yeah, no worries. We'll do it, but just a bit later, as long as we can get out past the border. But an angel appears to Mary and Joseph and says, skedaddle, you know, go to Egypt, don't look back. They're coming after you. And like I grew up in a very Christian sort of milieu, and Jesus was always a poor carpenter, you know. It was always, they were just like us, just ordinary, hard-working, poor people. But this thing of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, this stuff's worth heaps. And probably, you know, 5 million in today's money, maybe more. So they were loaded, you know. Jesus and his parents, unless the parents gambled it in Egypt. Jesus wasn't broke.
Let's not do that fanfic. they lost their inheritance gambling in Egypt.
Yeah, they're like a Vegas thing, you know all about it.
I sure do.
But yeah, so they had money and thereby the power to get things done. So that puts a fair different spin on it all, really, you know, that Jesus chose to do what he did. And I'm not going to criticize the typical ideas about what he was about, but I have a feeling that in my head, I think my guys, Odin, Vili, and Ve, might have been the Magi, you know, that because the whole thing about Odin, Snorri goes on at length about what a great wizard he is, and it goes into quite astounding detail of the powers he had and how he affected people and how he was really beautiful and young. It actually doesn't describe him as an old dude with one eye. Snorri actually doesn't talk about him missing an eye that I can recall. I think that's in the older poems, but that doesn't mean he didn't lose an eye someday, you know. But yeah, in practical terms, if we're talking about a being that really existed, I don't have any real trouble thinking that they could have been the Magi and they were wise men from the east. And wise men is pretty much what wizard means. It's fjolkunningur in Icelandic or Norse. It means great knowledge, wise, you know, wise to what's going on, having great íþróttir, which is one of my favourite words. In modern Icelandic, soccer is íþróttir. It's a sport or a skill. But in the old days, íþróttir was, you know, high-level abilities like yogic abilities, you know, magical abilities.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Mithrandir of J.R.R. Tolkien. That's the name of Gandalf. He actually called Gandalf Mithrandir. That's his real name.
Oh, wow. Well, as you know, Tolkien was a Norse scholar.
He knew what he was doing.
He studied all the stuff I'm studying. And, yeah, I think that there's mysteries within mysteries here. I do think, you know, if you've ever heard of Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
Sure have.
You've heard it? Yeah. Well, that's my family line are Stuarts. And, you know, I could be related to the Stuart royals or just one of the families around them, but we were definitely Stuarts way back. My name's David Stuart Lovegrove, so the Holy Blood, Holy Grail sort of concludes that Jesus got off the cross. I think that's what they say. And married Mary Magdalene, set up the Merovingian dynasty Yeah, and then they became the Stuart kings of Scotland and eventually all of Britain. And then there's that sort of Norse connection, and this is really this is the mysterious and tinfoil hatty Scandinavian stuff, but it could be just as real as anything else. That people do have made connections to the 12 tribes of Israel, somehow being the going to Britain, or the lost tribe going to Britain, and this sort of stuff. King Arthur being somehow connected, and these are really old stories. They're from like 400 AD. So who knows if there's anything to them? But the Holy Blood and Holy Grail I found was, somewhat convincing.
It's a fascinating narrative. If you guys, I mentioned this probably 3 weeks ago or so. I brought it up. Look into that. The matriarchy being usurped by the patriarchy, and Holy Blood and Holy Grail does a really good job of describing what that is, which is depicted very well by Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code. You guys are probably more familiar with that, with the chalice and the blade and all the rest of the symbolism that goes into that. A couple questions before we get out of here. Now, interestingly, you brought up the idea of a Viking mystic. It's a synchronicity. I was looking into this myself, by the way, over the past week here, knowing we were going to have this conversation. We'll get back to that in a sec. Remind me about the Viking mystic, okay? But James has a question in the chat. He says, if there's time, I would like to hear more from Dave about Odin giving up his eye for more insight. You got a take on that? Just sort of what you know about it, and just full context. James actually is legally blind, so I think there's maybe some additional info there that maybe you might need to know. But anyway, go ahead on that, and then I got a question regarding actual Viking mystics and some pronunciations and some fact checking of AI systems based on your knowledge.
Yeah. So I'll just answer James, or talk about what James said. Yeah. That Mimir, who I mentioned earlier, he's got this well that Odin said to have given. He put his eye in the well in exchange for wisdom, and I think poetry. I'm sorry if I don't seem to know everything, but I've got a lot in my head. But I think he gets the gift of poetry from the giving that eye, and poetry was seen by the Vikings as a type of ecstatic, visionary inspiration downloaded from the great everything, and that's what Odin literally means, is ecstasy or frenzy. That's what his name means, and it sort of means poetic, really high poetic inspiration and vision, and being able to see, the future and get messages that things are going to happen and warnings and whatever. So anyway, this Mimir is that one I was talking about, who was an AI, I think was an AI robot who got his head cut off. And in the stories up in at the end of the Rainbow Bridge, up in that area, Mimir has a well, and Odin sort of goes up there, consult him, and I think the eye. Right, there's two things here. To me, the well is a way of saying, probably like a great screen, like a glass screen, trying to describe if somebody saw. I think humans were taken into this very high-tech places, like that wizard Gylfi I talked about. Just told all the stories. I think they were there, and they saw these great big screens, which we would instantly recognise, but to them it was like, what's that big sheet of glass there? It looks like the water. It looks like water, shimmering water or whatever. And there's these young maidens who attend the well, and they sort of Norns. Pretty sure that's the Norns, but they have a lot to do with people's fate. But getting back to the eye, it seems to me in this paleo contact way of thinking that the eye is like an AI eye. That Odin swapped an organic eye for a artificial eye that could give him instant information and knowledge, so that the AI Mimir, who was sort of his constant companion, he could sort of call up information that he needed in his eye, so he could see it, and maybe it had other powers too. But that's how I think of that eye in this sort of head trip.
Yeah,
it wasn't just like he had to sacrifice it just because, I don't know, Mimir wanted to eat it for breakfast or something. I think he basically, it was an interface between the great AI Mimir and Odin. So the eye was put into him. What is that movie? There's been movies where people have, in TV series where they have an artificial eye that can see stuff. Minority Report, he swaps his eye out for another one. But yeah, there's other ones where they've had like an artificial eye that gives them access to. I think Johnny Mnemonic might have had something like that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
There was an eye.
There's also an ancient tale too, the tale of Perseus. So the three sisters of the Gorgons, we talked about this kind of recently. They shared an eye, and so Perseus tricked them into snatching their eye for the location of Medusa to go slay her and take her head and, you know, bring it back for the quest he was given by the gods, something to that effect. But interesting, we have once again the holy number, the 3, that sacred number. We have a singular eye amongst them, and then we have a hero sort of tricking them out of it to aspire to greater things. I don't know. It's wild as all this kind of cooks in, right? The more you look at this from different sort of lenses, the more things, I mean, maybe make more sense. I don't know. You guys decide. As usual, look, I'm not the arbiter of truth here, but it does make a lot of sense to me when. So clearly I know way more about Greek and Roman mythology than I do about the Norse stuff. This is why it's fascinating to talk to each other about these ideas. Now, my question for you regarding sort of the Viking mystic, I was, believe it or not, I was actually trying to pronounce these things over the week. There's something called a verva, or a
vulva.
Vulva. Vulva is how it's spelled. Supposedly,
Sounds a bit
verva. Yeah.
Sounds a bit feminine.
Yeah.
Vulva.
Exactly.
Vulva. It's O with the dots on the top.
Exactly.
And it sort of means a vulva in a way. Like they must be connected somehow. But they were women. They were very highly regarded
mystics. Right.
Mystic women in Iceland, and they must have been in the rest of Scandinavia. But in Iceland, the stories of the people, vulva would come to help with, you know, the seasons and the crops and childbirth and stuff like this, and they would treat her like really like a queen, and they'd build a platform, and she'd go into a sort of a trance and bring out messages. And I remember she had the vulvas would have a cloak made out of numerous types of skins, cat skins included, which sort of seems like almost connected to Freya, and a staff. And she was really pretty much a female wizard.
Exactly.
I know an old Icelandic lady who I consider a vulva, and we've known each other for about 25 years. And I think I told you, she told me once that she got a very strong message that I was somebody from one of the sagas.
Yes.
And, you know, reborn.
Yes.
So, yeah, vulvas, I reckon they're still around.
Yeah, so I was looking into this because I was thinking, sort of trying to, as you know me, like to try and do my best to think outside the box. I was like, so the Western trope of Vikings is, you know, strength and, you know, domination, and right, like if you're not strong, then are you worthy? And so I was like, so what does a Viking mystic look like? And so I started digging into that a little bit. And this is from Grok, by the way, so I don't know if it's accurate or not. So clearly the first one was accurate. There's another one called, it's a Spakona, or Spakona, I guess is how you might say it.
Yeah, Spakona.
Yeah.
Spakona.
Yeah, which is, again, sort of a, well, you tell me what you know. Let's fact check the AI based on what you know. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, remember I said that Odin and his wife had spaldom? You know, the ability to see the future, to be a seer, spal. It would be undoubtedly where our word spy comes from. To see, you know, to secretly see. So, you still there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm listening to you.
Oh, sorry, mate. I
No,
just had a
no,
ding
you're
on
good.
my phone. I thought I'd lost you.
No, you're good.
So yeah, Spal Corner. Corner means woman, and so it's a woman seer. Spal Corner. Yep, a woman.
And this is not to put you on the spot. I'm actually
seeing
testing.
woman.
Yeah, I'm testing to see if Grok. I did like a whole deep research thing to okay. So tell me about Viking seers. How come we don't hear about them often, and sort of the larger context of what we know about Vikings in the West, et cetera, so on. And it spit me out these names, and I asked him, because you know me, my pronunciations are horrific. If anybody's listened to the show for any amount of time, you know my pronunciations are horrific. But I asked,
it's not easy.
It's not easy at all. I asked it how to pronounce them. And it went into what we know about Old Norse. It went into what we know about Old Icelandic, like you've been studying. And I was surprised that it was actually giving me sort of what it knows, sort of quote pronunciations of these ideas. But anyway, so one of the things that came out of this, and I want to ask you this, and then we'll wrap this up. I see a Jay Winch. We'll get a question from you as well before we get out of here. But was there, as far as your knowledge, and again, like I said, not to put you on the spot, just kind of thrown out a question, something I was wondering about, with the strength of Vikings and sort of that domination aspect. Again, it's a trope, right? I mean, historically, yes, but also it's like a trope in the West. Is there sort of like an effeminate aspect of like a man-seer? You know what I mean? Like not a man-seer, like an actual male mystic. Was it sort of, as far as you're aware? Yeah. It seems like maybe. Well, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what a wizard is. I mean, I consider a wizard somebody who is the recipient of some kind of training, possibly from when they're young. I think the American Indian. You heard of Black Elk Speaks? You remember that?
I don't.
Anyway,
actually.
This old Indian, amazing story. Jesus, it's amazing. It was written in the 30s, but it's old Indian. But there's a thing where young medicine men usually were sort of set apart at about 12. They're usually a child that got very ill and came to the edge of death and probably had a near-death experience, and then they came back with powers. And that was my experience. So, it's not something I brag about because it's not something I have any control over. But first couple of years after I had my near-death experience, I exhibited some pretty extraordinary powers a couple of times. It was random. I didn't have any control over it. Sort of happened to me, but it definitely was what skeptics would say was complete BS. But it was true, and the people I met were complete skeptics, and they walked away complete believers into something more than we know. But that's the thing. The abilities of both men and women. There's this whole thing. There's this word called ergi, which he's probably told you about. It says that Odin could do, it was a seer and could do certain types of magic, but it was considered dishonorable for men to practice this. For some reason Odin gets a pass, but it doesn't go into what that means. And some people have said maybe it's like homosexuality, maybe it's, a sexual thing, but I sort of doubt it. There is an idea, you might have heard this, but homosexual men, for some reason, are considered to be often geniuses. It's sort of like supposed to be part of genius with many people, not everybody. And also Colonel John B. Alexander, my friend, who was in Project Stargate in the US, involved in the US Army, told me that the best remote viewer was a gay guy, and that they ended up Hal Puthoff, I think.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Right, that they when they were looking for guys who could be remote viewers, they often look for them being gay. And I definitely have somewhat of that power, but I don't appear to be gay. I like guys, but I don't feel any.
Well, that wasn't my point in bringing it up. And my theory on that, by the way, that what you just said.
I think it's real.
Yeah, but my theory is that it was very Stranger Things-esque, where it's trauma. So it's trauma-based sort of MK Ultra mind control, and certainly people that are living in a society where they are not given a fair shot. Okay, and that's being nice about it. It's way more gruesome than that in terms of being accepted or whatever. That's additional baked-in trauma to what we have to deal with anyway. So clearly, gay people have a massive amount of this additional trauma as just part of being humans in our society. So that makes a ton of sense to me. I've never heard that, by the way, but it's once again, right? Some things kind of come together.
Interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's sort of, I didn't make it up. It's in different books about genius and gifts that gay men often, like Da Vinci was supposed to be gay, and I don't know what the exact connection is. I've always got on well with gay guys. They always liked me. When I was young, I guess I was a handsome guy that they liked, and as an older guy, they still like me because I'm a sort of a bear. But I usually get on well with them intellectually. I find them really bright. Not all of them, but more than the average dude. And this ergy thing is, this is where there's gaps in what we're trying to work out what they're saying, but I don't think it really means sexuality. I think it's more that it's like, how Conan always is, he's not scared of anything except sorcerers. Sorcery freaks him out. He's happy to take on any amount of bad dudes with axes and clubs, but when he meets sorcerers, he gets spooked. He doesn't like magic. And I think that's what it is. I think the Viking standard warrior thought this stuff was unmanly because it was cheating, that somebody could do stuff to you and wouldn't put up a fair fight and go head to head and, clubbing each other.
Cast a spell.
It's like, damn it. They're fighting like a woman. They're using magic. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, North Dixon over there says Odin was able to embody both feminine and masculine energy. Not everything is sexuality based. And yeah, exactly. Sort of my point in bringing that up is I think it's multiple points is basically what I'm trying to say here. But anyway, we don't have to spin off into that.
The Allfather was called. Yeah, the Allfather was. One of the names for the Allfather was gelding in English, meaning emasculated horse. And I've always thought, people often say, what is it? What could that possibly mean? But I think it means that, non-sexuality is sort of, a deity. It doesn't really make sense that a deity who lives forever is always obsessing about sex like some teenager. Male and female is a very earthy, rudimentary, animalistic thing. It's very important, but at a very high level, what's it got to do with anything,
Yeah, it's complicated, rich, and varied, and that's why we talk about these ideas. Let's get a question from Jay Winch, and let's get the hell out of here. Thanks again for your time. I'll tell everybody about your book in just a moment. Once again, looking forward to the next one and the next one. And as you know, you've got an invite back. If you want to continue this conversation, you just let me know. Well,
thanks,
you're
Mike.
a friend.
I love it. I really love it.
Absolutely glad to have you.
You can hear me now.
Jay Winch, welcome to the joint. Sorry for making you wait. Go ahead. As you know, we're late. Let's wrap this. You got a question for Dave? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I got a question for you. When's the last time you said, you know what? F it. Tomorrow's Friday. There's a lot of people I go to work with that really don't pull their weight. Go ahead and stay up, Mike. I'll be that evil person on your shoulder that says, let's keep this conversation going.
Strike three, you're out. I got stuff to do, and I got people relying on me both ways.
I know. I had to open up with that, but no, it was a great show. I was listening. I wanted to chime in for a long time, but I was also watching the TV show The Vikings. Vikings TV show. It's got all the people. It doesn't show Odin and all those people, but this, that, and the other. But when I first chimed in, it was talking about sigils. Viking man was, and Mike, that was like your opening question.
Runes.
Well, sigils are everywhere, and marks are everywhere. Like if you go into a wrong neighborhood wearing the wrong color, there's certain markings / nowadays sigils. You're wearing the wrong color, and you have to be careful what you're doing. And I'll just leave it at that because I know you're trying to check out. Like, there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about on this, but you know, you're going to bed, so I'll leave it there.
Appreciate
if
you
I have
very
a
much.
question for the Viking.
Sure.
Odin prayed to who? The All-Father?
Well, they sort of said that he was the All-Father.
Yeah,
I don't know if he prayed to anybody, really.
The All-Father, his father. Odin's father died upon a tree and had a spear stuck into him, just like Jesus.
Oh, that was Odin.
Odin's All-Father. Ooh, yeah, deep dive it. I have.
Yeah, there's a connection
All-Father, yeah, his dad hung himself upon a tree and had somebody stab him in the heart. And it's ironic that it ties back into the Christian, and then the tribes, the 12 tribes and the 13th tribe sent away. But actually the 13th tribe that was sent away modern day was a certain thing. I won't say their names, but because they were sent to up towards the Tower of Babylon, and it's like 3000 BC.
Perfect.
I'm being careful because we're on YouTube. I don't want to say certain things.
Thank you. Jay Winch.
Some of the people put those together.
Thanks for
Some of those people put that together.
Thanks for the thoughts and the question. Thanks for staying up late with us. As you know, we're trying to wrap. Go ahead, Dave, and your thought on that.
Yeah, well, that's what I said earlier about the two strands. There's a fascinating rabbit hole to go down to with Viking spirituality that's very much mystical, and then there's the rabbit hole of, was there also high-tech physical things you could touch, beings and craft and cities and things that just shouldn't be there according to the standard issue explanation for our history. And that's my thing, is to look into both, to bring it to the world and just say, hey, this is what I've found. What do you think? You know, do you think this could be part of the real history of the humans, and could these people still be here? And can we perhaps also still keep in contact with them and hear from them because of, you know, I just leave this last thing, that telepathy is always a part of encounters. You know, people seem to always say that when they get abducted or if they meet beings, there's some kind of telepathy going on, and I talk about it a little bit in the book. And I think that's where the spiritual and the physical overlap, and that's where it can blow modern minds. For people who don't believe in those sort of abilities, they might say, well, I can believe in flying saucers, but I can't believe they can talk in my head. So that's just their door that they've got, stopping them from looking further. But I don't have those gaps. I've had enough experiences to know that it's all very possible.
Yeah, and
thanks heaps, Mike.
Yeah, you're the best, brother.
Sorry.
I know it's been a long show. Appreciate you very much. Thanks for again doing the great work here.
I could keep talking.
Okay.
I've got a doctor's appointment in half an hour, so I better get moving. My wife's going to be here kicking me in the butt, saying, "Come on,
get out of here,
talking to you, mate.
Get out of here." I'll tell everybody about your book. We'll send me an email. We'll meet up again, and there's so much more to talk about. Keep doing God's work, and always a pleasure, brother. Thanks for being a friend, and you have a great night or a great afternoon.
Thank you, brother. You're a good friend too, and see you to everybody, all my dear friends over there in the States, in New Zealand, and to Lily in Australia, and hopefully there's some other Aussies listening.
Amen. You're the best, brother.
Yeah. See ya.
Have a great one. That's again, Dave Lovegrove, Viking Superpowers. Please go check this book out. Like I said, I was fortunate enough when you meet people with great ideas and have the pleasure of being the radio host of Troubled Minds, you get to copies of things before they're released. So I was perusing through his book, and it's fantastic. Please go check it out. Again, Viking Superpowers, Way of Asgard is what it's called. It is on Amazon right now on Kindle. The physical copies are coming. Please help our friends. That's what this has always been about. That's what this will continue to be about. And you guys know the drill. If you want to be on the show, you got some ideas, just send them to me, email them, whatever. Hit me up on Discord or X or wherever. And look, I'm doing my best. And if you think that I don't have, or like I'm not answering you enough or something, please understand. Like, there's only one of me, and I have to sleep too, and I have to eat too, and I have to work too. I have to do all these things. So if I haven't answered you, I'm sorry about that. I'm working on it. I promise. So many things happening, and it's a wild time to be alive. That's for sure. Once again, go if you got a few bucks to spend, please go help our friends. Don't even think about me. Don't think about Troubled Minds. Go buy Dave's book. Go check this out. Links are in the description down below. There's 2 links, one for Australia, another one for North America. Okay. So make sure you get the right one, and yeah, go check it out. Definitely go check it out. Again, $9.99 in North America, $10 for the actual, yeah, that's it. That's it, right? Is that it? Which button do I push? This one? I think that's the one. Yeah. Fire stuff. Looking forward to his next book and continuing to delve into what he's written, because of course, as usual, these explorations, they don't end. There's always different ways to look at it, and this is why we do it together. If you want to help Troubled Minds help our friends, go buy Dave's book. Links in the description down below. If you want to wait for the paperback or whatever, the physical copy, please do that. But there's a Kindle. You guys like Kindle? Digital version? Go listen. Go check it out. Please. That's the whole point of this, is to talk about wild ideas with regular people. That's it. That's what it's always been. And like I said, you decide where you want to check out idea-wise. Some people are kind of locked into a sphere of this or a sphere of that. That's okay. It's totally okay. I don't even have spheres. Like, my spheres have become the spheres of the universe or whatever. Like, I wonder about things that we've never wondered about. That's why you're here, am I right? No answers from me, just more questions, just more ideas, and that's exactly the point of all this. If you want to help Troubled Minds, help our friends, troubledminds.org/friends. Dave is on that list. Viking Superpowers. Scroll down. It's alphabetical. He's under the V there. Please go help. Follow all these amazing people that have made this show go. And that's the way I see it. If you want to help Troubled Minds directly, you know what to do. Spread the word. Let people know a conversation's happening where we're not going to tell you who to vote for. We're not going to talk about actual politics in the sense of official narratives. We're just not going to do that. We don't do that. Like, we point out some weirdness of these narratives, but recognize when you have a fracturing society of ideas, your own narratives might be more powerful than theirs. There's a whole thread there that we just talked about that it's too late to get into, but trust me, this stuff is deep, it's heavy, and storytelling itself, shout out James with the question with the eye and Odin, poetry was the trade-off for his eye. And remember, Brian Johnson, the weirdo guy that's trying to live forever, he said this, paraphrased, storytelling is the most powerful technology there is. Interesting, right? The plot thickens. There you go. Thanks again for staying up late with us. Thanks for all the amazing ideas. Not taking any more calls. I see you, Kramos. High five, buddy. We're shutting this down. That's it. TroubledMinds.org. Come say hi if you want to help us directly and spend some money on it. It's there. There's ways to do it. I got some ideas coming. I don't know. Like, I just feel really bad about kind of squeezing down the everything into like a monetized funnel, but maybe that's where we go. I don't know. We'll see. I'm still thinking about it, but of course, live will always be free, and that's that. Anyway, as we finish, it goes exactly like this, and this one goes out to Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers in Australia. Be sure, be strong, be true. Thank you for listening. From our troubled minds to yours, Have a great night.